After being on the air for nearly 30 years and more than 600 episodes, there aren't really many aspects of life that haven't been touched upon by The Simpsons. As surreal as their animated adventures may be, from time to time, life imitates art. We've lost count of the times that bizarre storylines from Springfield actually came true. But here are just a few occasions when The Simpsons freakishly predicted the future. President Trump. One of many episodes that showed an alternate reality future for Springfield's first family, Bart to the Future, aired in the year 2000, and we learn Lisa has just been elected President of the United States. During her first cabinet meeting, President Simpson mentions a familiar name.
As you know, we've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump.
We all know how the future turned out. It's worth mentioning that this particular episode was written during Donald Trump's failed presidential run in the year 2000, and the writers themselves saw the possibility of a Trump presidency as the most ridiculous thing they could imagine for the future, which can only mean that Lisa Simpson is up next. And then, President Kang.
All hail President Kang!
Could be worse. We could be eating Soylent, which is literally named after ground-up people from a sci-fi movie starring Charlton Heston. Wait.
Soylent is food. While not intended to replace every meal, Soylent can replace any meal.
Oh, what a bleak, horrible future we live in!
All you can eat. In 1992's New Kid on the Block, Homer sees a TV commercial for an all-you-can-eat seafood restaurant called The Frying Dutchman. Homer proceeds to eat until closing time and gets kicked out, while still hungry. He sues the restaurant for false advertising, but Homer and the sea captain come to an agreement.
Come see Bottomless Pete, nature's cruelest mistake. Come for the freak, stay for the food.
In 2012, Bill With went to a Wisconsin restaurant called Chuck's Place for its weekly Friday night fish fry buffet. After a few trips to the restaurant and racking up a running tab, he wanted more. But the restaurant claimed they'd run out. That's when Wiss refused to pay.
We asked for more fish, and they refused to give us any more fish.
The owner of Chuck's Place claimed Wiss had eaten more than 20 pieces of fish and was violating the buffet's no-sharing policy. He came back with a vengeance.
And he wasn't done. He came back 2 days later with a picket sign.
Wist planned on picketing every day, but by early 2013, he had already moved on to other protests. But really?
Did these sound like the actions of a man who had all he could eat?
No! That could have been me!
People unknowingly ate gym mats. Over the course of the series, the secrets of Springfield Elementary's lunchroom cost-cutting have been explored again and again, but even lunch lady Doris has her limits.
Where do you want these beef hearts?
On the floor.
In the 1995 episode The PTA Disbands, even Doris objects to using shredded newspaper and old gym mats as ingredients.
Posh. Shredded newspapers add much-needed roughage and essential inks. Besides, you didn't notice the old gym mats.
There's very little meat in these gym mats.
In 2014, a minor but disgusting scandal developed when the Environmental Working Group released a report that found a compound called azodicarbonamide in around 500 processed food products, primarily breads, including Pillsbury dinner rolls, your favorite $5 footlongs, and Wonder Bread. So if you've ever wondered what put the wonder in Wonder Bread, it's yoga mats, and yoga is totally healthy. The Baby Translator. By season 2, Homer had met his long-lost brother Herb, but he leaves Herb in financial ruin after he bets his whole car manufacturing business on a ridiculous car Homer designs, which was called the Homer, obviously.
Any questions?
Left destitute, he moves in with The Simpsons, where he creates a baby translator that turns an infant's noise into English.
Maggie! Maggie! Whatever!
Where did you go?
Peekaboo!
Oh, there you are. Very amusing.
The original episode aired in 1992, and by the year 2004, Japanese tech and toy company Takara developed a real-life prototype of something very similar. After previously selling a device that analyzed the sounds of dogs barking, the prototype analyzed the baby's sounds, facial expressions, and body temperature to alert parents if the baby was hungry, tired, or needed to be changed. While the final product never emerged, other companies took the reins and produced other devices to analyze memorize the fleshy, wet, loud riddles that are infants, ensuring that you'll always be able to completely emotionally detach from your helpless offspring. Yay! A donut-shaped universe. At the end of They Saved Lisa's Brain, a 1999 episode in which Lisa and her local Mensa chapter attempt to rule Springfield with their superior intellect. The smartest guy in the world makes a cameo, physicist and cosmologist Stephen Hawking, and he has some very interesting ideas.
Your theory of a donut-shaped universe is intriguing, Homer. I may have to steal it.
Wow.
Technically, the shape of a donut is a torus, and yes, as it turns out, the universe may actually be shaped like the delicious confection. 4 years after Homer Simpson proposed the theory, cosmologists noticed radiation patterns in space suggesting that the universe was round and tube-like, but empty in the middle. And that's not the only time Homer's been the smartest man in Springfield.
I am too smart. I am too smart. I am too smart. S-M-R-T. S-M-A-R-T.
The Higgs boson. While first proposed in 1964, it wasn't until 2013 that physicists discovered the Higgs boson, the field that basically holds atoms together. In other words, the discovery helps to define the very fabric of existence, and helps to maintain how the universe and matter work. And, once again, Homer was on the cutting edge of science. In the 1998 episode, The Wizard of Evergreen Terrace, Homer attempts to become a scientist and inventor, and is seen messing around with some formulas on a chalkboard. His meaningless math actually gets pretty close to the actual molecular weight of the Higgs particle, which, out of an infinite possible equations, is pretty impressive. But more importantly, when is reality going to finally catch up with the toilet chair?
Believe me, every man in America will want to have one.
Gangway, gotta poop.
Lady Gaga. The halftime show of the 2017 Super Bowl made headlines, with Lady Gaga delivering a performance that was absolutely surreal, featuring high-wire stunts, pyrotechnics, and theatrical costumes. Having provided her own voice for her 2012 appearance on The Simpsons, Gaga was definitely familiar with her earlier animated performance, which bore some striking similarities to her Super Bowl show. Granted, Gaga's Springfield self was only a slight exaggeration on her normally outlandish persona.
It's me, Gaga! Why is everyone looking at my purple hair full of bloopers?
But this one is pretty spot on. The Albuquerque Isotopes. The 2001 episode Hungry Hungry Homer is all about Homer going on a hunger strike to prevent the local minor league baseball team, the Springfield Isotopes, from secretly moving to Albuquerque.
Dancing away my hunger pangs, moving my feet so my stomach won't hurt.
In 2002, the minor league Calgary Cannons announced a move to Albuquerque, and the local paper published a poll asking readers to come up with a new name for the team. No strangers to pop culture, the name Isotopes won, with 67% of the vote. While the idea very clearly came from The Simpsons, Isotopes is appropriate for a team moving so close to the Los Alamos National Laboratory. At least the power plants in New Mexico can't possibly be as bad as in Springfield, right?
Well, in southern New Mexico, federal officials have confirmed that a local nuclear plant is leaking waste and releasing radiation into the surrounding area.
Nope, those suck too. Stay safe, Isotopes. Renowned physicist Stephen Hawking has died at the age of 76, but his contributions to humanity will live on forever, including what is arguably his life's most important work, his appearances on The Simpsons. News of the late scientist's passing inspired a number of tributes in the entertainment world, which Hawking had an outsized influence on. As a public figure, the author never restricted himself to purely academic appearances, lending his likeness or voice to a number of high-profile pop culture projects. Outside of academia, Hawking appeared as himself on an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, as well as multiple episodes of The Simpsons, Futurama, and The Big Bang Theory.
I made a boo-boo, and I gave it to Stephen Hawking.
He also lent his voice, a synthesized program, to the Pink Floyd albums The Division Bell and The Endless River. After Hawking's death, a Simpsons showrunner Al Jean spoke to The Hollywood Reporter about the experience of arranging the professor's hilarious first appearance on the series' season 10 episode They Saved Lisa's Brain.
If you are looking for trouble, you found it.
Gene explained, what we would do is send him the script and then he would record it through his machine. So it was his voice, his special audio program. He did come to the studio when he was in America, but he didn't ever go to record. Over the course of his 3 appearances on the show, Hawking was willing to go along with just about everything the writers wanted him to say, except one thing in his first episode that rubbed him the wrong way. Gene said, he did say at one point that he did not want to be drunk on screen. That was the only note we got from him. He didn't mind having a beer with Homer at Moe's, but not more.
Your theory of a donut-shaped universe is intriguing, Homer. I may have to steal it.
Hawking's first appearance, in which Homer Simpson famously mistook him for hustler magnate Larry Flint, came about thanks to a personal connection. Hawking's daughter, Lucy, knew one of the show's writers, who wanted to pen an episode involving him.
I accepted immediately, because it would be fun, and because The Simpsons is the best thing on American television.
Aside from the drinking scene, Hawking had no problems with the way the long-running cartoon series depicted him. He said, "My treatment in The Simpsons was always good-humored. I was depicted as a somewhat surreal character with enormous powers." Gene added that the reason he scripted the late academic the way he did was he saw him as a superstar in his own right, saying, "Everyone wanted to get their picture taken with him. It was an honor to be able to briefly interact with the Albert Einstein of our time. I still can't get over it."
Time for this hog to fly.
Hopes, rumors, and then actual news of a movie based on the long-running TV classic The Simpsons floated around for years before The Simpsons movie was released in 2007. It was worth the wait. A hilarious animated adventure with a big story befitting the big screen, the film made more than $500 million at the worldwide box office. It's been 10 years since everyone's favorite four-fingered Springfield residents proved they could make the jump from television, so how come they haven't made The Simpsons movie 2 yet? A good idea. The show's writers and producers don't want to attempt another big screen project just for the sake of doing it. It's such a monumental project with millions of dollars at stake and millions of fans with exacting standards that they'll only make another Simpsons movie if they've got a really good idea. One that's really worth a 90-minute treatment. During a Simpsons panel at the 2016 San Diego Comic-Con, writer-producer Al Jean addressed the possibility of doing another Simpsons movie.
We talk about it, but it's, if we do it, we only want to do it if it's going to be really good.
Already used it. At one point, the writers actually thought they had a great idea for the next Simpsons movie. In an episode initially conceived as the 24th season finale, Kang and Kodos, the humongous booming-voiced aliens that have appeared in numerous Treehouse of Horror Halloween specials, kidnap the Simpsons family from Disneyland and take them to their distant home planet of Rigel 7, where Homer is nearly eaten. Al Jean, who co-wrote the episode with David Merkin, decided with Simpsons executive producer James L. Brooks that the plot was so ambitious that they should use it for the next Simpsons movie. Jean told Entertainment Weekly, "We were worried that people might think it's an idea that's not canonical, because the plot is so far gone from the generally realistic scenarios of The Simpsons." The script went back into the episode pile and aired as The Man Who Came to Be Dinner in 2015. Too many ideas. Perhaps the real problem isn't that the Simpsons writers don't have a good idea for a sequel, it's that they can't pick just one. For example, before they settled on the plot of the first Simpsons movie, the writers floated several large-scale movie-worthy concepts. The 4th season episode Camp Krusty, in which Bart and Lisa attend a terrifying decrepit summer camp that descends into nightmarish chaos, was nearly a movie. Matt Groening wanted to make a Fantasia parody called Simptasia, consisting of short animated sequences set to music. And before his death in 1998, Phil Hartman planned on making a live-action film about his Simpsons character, B-movie actor Troy McClure.
He can talk, he can talk, he can talk, he can talk!
I can sing!
Matt Groening isn't thrilled. Any Simpsons movie has to get the sign-off from Simpsons creator and executive producer Matt Groening. Even 30 years after his characters debuted on The Tracy Ullman Show, he's still very much involved with any and all major decisions affecting his prize creation. And as far as a sequel goes, he's in no rush. Why? The first one was a grind. In a 2009 interview, Groening said the first movie was an experience that left him frustrated, in part because he and other members of the creative team thought it would take 2 years to produce, but it ended up taking 4. While speaking at UCLA Law School in 2013, Groening said the first film, quote, stole animators from the show and drained resources. At the same speaking engagement, Simpsons producer and director David Silverman estimated that another movie would happen in another 10-15 years. Busy Simpsons. James L. Brooks, a Simpsons executive producer since the show debuted in 1989, told The Hollywood Reporter that the Simpsons creative team hasn't made another movie because they're doing a lot of other stuff. Brooks meant that whatever time the Simpsons makers have for work outside the show itself is spent on Simpsons-related extracurricular activities, such as a series of live Simpsons shows at the Hollywood Bowl or developing the scores of Simpsons bonus material for the Simpsons World app.
It's the all-new Simpsons ride.
Happy times.
The Simpsons is still on TV. Probably the main impediment preventing The Simpsons writers, cast, and crew from making another Simpsons movie is The Simpsons. The same people who'd make another movie are already pretty busy making 22 episodes of the show every year. That's a huge workload. Episodes take months between conception and full animation, so each is a lengthy and costly endeavor involving a small army of employees. Simpsons producer and director David Silverman told Entertainment Weekly in 2017 that a sequel is daunting because it really knocked the stuffing out of us to do the movie and the show at the same time. If the crew doesn't want to make a movie at the same time as the show, don't expect that sequel anytime soon. The Simpsons has been renewed until at least 2019. Fox hasn't ordered one yet. While another Simpsons movie would be a surefire hit and a no-brainer for all involved, the fact remains that Studio 20th Century Fox hasn't technically asked for one yet. The creative team isn't about to move mountains to make another movie until they're officially asked and contracts are signed. Otherwise, why work on something that might not get made anytime soon or ever? Nevertheless, Simpsons writer-producer Al Jean says a movie is in its earliest stages, which probably means the show's writers are tossing around ideas and getting a game plan together for if and when their corporate bosses ever commission a Simpsons movie sequel. Keep those stubby yellow fingers crossed.
Since its debut in 1989, The Simpsons has broadcast over 600 episodes, won more than 24 Emmys and a Peabody Award, and sold millions of dollars worth of merchandise. It's a pop culture juggernaut, which means that there's a small fortune of lore and behind-the-scenes trivia out there about Springfield's first family. Pretty much the only adult Bart Simpson actually respects is kids' TV show host Krusty the Clown. When Matt Groening and his writing staff were developing the show early on, however, someone floated the concept that Krusty and Homer were actually going to be the same person. As Groening told Entertainment Weekly, the original idea behind Krusty the Clown was that he was Homer in disguise, but Homer still couldn't get any respect from his son, who worshipped Krusty. Unfortunately, it became too complicated a plot detail to work out once the show was really getting off the ground, so the idea was abandoned. But vestiges of the arc remain. Krusty and Homer have an almost identical character design. Krusty just has different hair and clown paint, and they're both voiced by the same actor. Later on, the 6th-season episode Homie the Clown references the original idea and features Homer becoming a Krusty the Clown impersonator.
Wow! I'm sorry I doubted you before, Dad. If there has to be a bastardized version of Krusty, I'm glad it's you.
The Simpsons' rivalry with President George H.W. Bush goes back a lot further than the neighborhood dispute which erupts in 1996's Two Bad Neighbors. In a 1990 interview with People, then First Lady Barbara Bush dismissed the show, saying, "It was the dumbest thing I had ever seen." In response, the show's writers, under the guise of Marge Simpson, sent Mrs. Bush a letter defending the show. Marge wrote, "I recently read your criticism of my family. I was deeply hurt. Heaven knows we're far from perfect, and if truth be known, maybe just a wee bit short of normal. But as Dr. Seuss says, a person is a person." Barbara apologized, but things didn't end there. Early in his 1992 re-election campaign, President Bush told the Convention of National Religious Broadcasters,
"We are going to keep on trying to strengthen the American family, to make American families a lot more like the Waltons and a lot less like the Simpsons."
A subsequent episode of The Simpsons featured the family watching a clip of Bush's speech.
Huh?
Hey, we're just like the Waltons. We're praying for an end to the Depression, too.
In the Season 3 episode Stark Raving Dad, Homer is mistakenly sent to a psychiatric institution where he's befriended by a hulking, balding patient named Leon who identifies himself as Michael Jackson. He certainly had the voice of Michael Jackson, because the real king of pop lent his voice to the character.
Who are you?
Hi, I'm Michael Jackson from the Jacksons.
I'm Homer Simpson from The Simpsons.
In the credits, however, he was billed under the name John J. Smith. So how did a relatively new TV series land the biggest pop star in the world? Jackson simply phoned up and asked. A fan of the show, Jackson at first wanted to play himself, but eventually went with the writers when they conceived the character of Leon. The Simpsons is one of the few successful long-running TV shows to never have generated a spin-off, but it's not for lack of trying. In 1994, Matt Groening wrote a script for a new series that found Krusty the Clown getting his own talk show and moving to Los Angeles. But it wasn't going to be a cartoon. Groening wanted it to be a live-action series, with Krusty's voice actor Dan Castellaneta reprising his role in the flesh. Eventually, Groening accepted it had to take the form of an animated series instead because this whole thing was just too expensive to pull off in real life. Unfortunately, the animated show never saw the light of day either after negotiations between Groening and Fox stalled. But creativity prevailed. Groening's next project was a little show about Earth in the year 3000. In late 1988, when The Simpsons was still just a feature on The Tracy Ullman Show, producers made a deal with Butterfinger for a commercial featuring Bart Simpson. The script called for Bart to compare lunches with a friend at school, so Simpsons staff filed through a series of drawings that Groening had done for an ultimately unproduced NBC Saturday morning cartoon set in a grade school. The one they picked to use as Bart's foil was an especially nerdy-looking kid who remained unnamed in the commercial. He needed a name, however, if he was to become part of The Simpsons proper.
Is this the untimely end of Milhouse?
But Milhouse is my name.
But I thought I was the only one.
A pain I know all too well.
Why is he named Milhouse? According to Groening, I named him Milhouse because I thought that was the most unfortunate name I could think of for a kid.
This is great! And all I've done is enter my name! Thrill House!
The episode The Itchy and Scratchy and Poochie Show parodied the once common TV practice of shows bringing in a cooler, younger, or out-of-this-world character to freshen things up. On The Simpsons, it's Bart's beloved Itchy and Scratchy cartoon, which adds Poochie, a sunglasses-wearing, rapping surfer voiced by Homer. Poochie ends up a total flop, with practically everyone but Homer seeing right through the cheap ratings ploy. The premise is paralleled in The Simpsons household, which suddenly includes a never-before-seen sunglasses-wearing dude named Roy, who at the end of the episode moves out.
Good news, everybody. I'm moving into my own apartment with 2 sexy ladies.
Well, then I guess this is goodbye, Roy.
Fox had recently tried to do the same thing to The Simpsons. Before the 8th season began, Fox executives asked then showrunners Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein to add a new, fresh face to The Simpsons family. The writers gave them Roy and Poochie instead. As for Poochie, well, he had the greatest send-off ever.
I have to go now. My planet needs me.
The Simpsons isn't subject to the regular rules of television, and because of that, a lot of plots and fates are left dangling, never to be resolved. So we're looking at some big questions that The Simpsons posed over the years and which it never fully answered. The Simpsons has been on so long that its opening sequence is almost as famous as the show itself. With more than 600 episodes under its belt, most Simpsons fans could recall it from memory. We've got Bart writing a sentence on a classroom blackboard wall a few dozen times as punishment, Lisa getting kicked out of band practice for playing jazz, Maggie getting picked up with Marge's groceries and being swiped across a cashier's barcode scanner, and Homer cutting out of work when he hears the whistle blow, carelessly allowing a nuclear rod to bounce around after him. Every one of these events warrants some inspection. Bart abandons the chalkboard when he hears a school bell ring. But why does a bell ring when this is obviously his after-school punishment? And why is Lisa's band class, often depicted as part of her regular school day, being held after class? These events suggest that it's about 3 or 4 o'clock, which seems early for Homer's 9-to-5 gig to end. As for Maggie getting scanned, a price pops up for the grocery cashier, meaning Maggie is seemingly wearing a barcode. According to The Telegraph, Simpsons creator Matt Groening stated that the price that appears on the register is $847.63. It was the cost of raising a child in 1989 when the show first appeared on Fox. A running gag in The Simpsons wasn't only hilarious wordplay, but its characterization of Bart Simpson as a rude, cynical troublemaker. Bart would call Moe's Tavern and ask to speak with someone, and he'd always give a made-up name that was either an insult or a pun. Moe would then call out to the assorted barflies.
See more butts? Hey, everybody! I want to see more butts!
Bart would then descend into a fit of giggles, and realizing he'd been pranked yet again, Moe would threaten acts of violence against the caller should he ever discover their identity. But Moe should have figured out over a dozen times that his frequent prank caller is the eldest Simpson child. Homer is one of Moe's best customers, and Moe is a family friend, but it's good that we, the audience, get to enjoy his ongoing confusion. C. Montgomery Burns is the town villain who owns the Springfield nuclear power plant. He once blocked the sun, he's stolen puppies, and he's incredibly old. He's fond of using old-timely insults like Dunderpate, answers the phone by saying, "Ahoy hoy," and tries to stack his company's softball team with dead professional baseball players. Burns' age is clearly just a vehicle for jokes and hilariously archaic words, but it doesn't make his age clear. His birth year has been given both as 1881 and 1890, making him at least 100 in the Simpsons universe. But in the Season 4 episode Last Exit to Springfield, there's a flashback to Burns as a boy in 1909 visiting an atom-smashing mill as a school-age boy, placing his birth around 1900. Also, in the Season 2 episode Simpson and Delilah, Burns' age is said to be 81, although in a few other episodes that age changes to 104. And when Springfield's oldest man dies at age 108, Burns takes his place. He could even be older, but it's obvious that the writers won't make it clear or let this joke die. In the 6th season episode Fear of Flying, Homer is rewarded for helping an airline hide its cover-up by mistaking him for a pilot. But the resulting trip is canceled because Marge suffers a panic attack while awaiting takeoff. They get off the plane and Marge sees a psychiatrist to find the cause of her fear of flying. A repressed memory reveals that Marge hates flying because when she was very young, she found out her father was secretly a flight attendant and not a pilot like she had thought. At the end of the episode, Marge is cured of her fear and gets on a plane with the family, only for it to run off the runway and crash into a lake. Marge's deep discomfort with flying remains both intact and justified, something which doesn't mesh with events in earlier seasons. The Simpsons family goes on to take multiple vacations and trips via airplane, Marge included. She never seems to be anything but totally comfortable and relaxed before and during these air voyages. According to the Simpsons wiki, it's theorized that the episodes are out of order, which could explain Marge's inconsistent comfort with flying. A permanent fixture at Moe's Tavern is Barney Gumble. He's seemingly always inebriated or in the process of becoming inebriated. Barney's obvious alcoholism is a dark but frequent source of comedy. He once won the Springfield Film Festival with his beautiful and haunting movie about his battle with the bottle, and viewers learned that he had a promising future until Homer gave him his first beer the night before the SATs, setting Barney on a drunken path.
Lachrymose is to dyspeptic as ebullient is to effervescent. All right, Harvard, here I come.
In the season 11 episode Days of Wine and Dozes, Barney swears off beer, joins Alcoholics Anonymous, and adjusts to a life in recovery. But his addictive tendencies still run deep, and he still hangs out at the bar because Moe buys an espresso machine, whereafter Barney eliminates his dependency on alcohol by getting hooked on caffeine. A well-groomed Barney is shown drinking latte after latte, until one day Barney is once more permanently a slob knocking back brewskis. So what exactly led Barney to fall off the wagon and why? Unfortunately, we haven't gotten an answer yet. Throughout the series, Homer meets lots of new people and invents, makes, or schemes his way into just about everything. In the Season 2 episode, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, Homer's estranged half-brother Herb is a successful car company owner who lets Homer design a car that's such a flop it destroys the company and leaves him destitute. After being homeless for a while, Herb returns in the Season 3 Brother, Can You Spare Two Dimes? And stays with the Simpson family for a while until he gets back on his feet. With Maggie's help, Herb develops a baby translator, and it's an instant success that makes him wildly rich once more. To show his appreciation, he buys Homer the expensive luxury recliner he's had his eye on. This episode hinges upon two very important objects, a device that unlocks the language of infants and a huge piece of furniture. But the two objects are never addressed again on The Simpsons. A baby translator would change the world but is never mentioned again, and hundreds of scenes have transpired in The Simpsons TV room with Homer firmly planted on the couch and not his fancy chair. In the Season 4 episode Marge vs. the Monorail, frivolously spending town money on a transit system seemed like such a futuristic and progressive idea. It even had a catchy song, introduced by monorail proprietor Lyle Landley, convincing them to give Landley the cash windfall collected from Mr. Burns for crimes against the environment. Of course, the monorail was a civic, financial, and political disaster, but no ramifications or fallout ever seemed to transpire. Not only is Main Street still all cracked and broken, as Marge pointed out in the monorail song, but the town was left in far worse shape when a makeshift anchor to stop the runaway monorail ripped through several streets and buildings. Did Springfield fix all those roads? And if so, how did the cash-strapped town pay for it? Are the monorail towers, tracks, and trains still hanging around Springfield? There's also the whereabouts of Lyle Landley to wonder about.
Mr. Landley! Aren't you gonna ride the monorail?
Little lady, I'd love to, but I have to catch a plane.
But the ride only takes a minute.
Yeah, well, my plane leaves in less than 1 minute.
He built the monorail on the cheap and escaped with the rest of the cash, only for his getaway plane to perform an emergency landing in another town he victimized, where an angry mob confronted him. It's possible those townfolk threw him in jail on charges of criminal negligence, but it still doesn't account for the instantaneous recovery of Springfield. The Season 12 episode The Computer Wore Menace Shoes is undoubtedly one of the strangest of The Simpsons catalog. Homer starts a website and spreads rumors and conspiracy theories that he makes up until he accidentally gets one right. When he tells the public that flu shots are performed just before Christmas to incite the mass urge to shop, he's sent to a strange, spooky, and surreal island prison. Among the occupants are a man who invented a bottomless peanut bag, Homer's German-speaking doppelganger, and a bunch of menacing bubbles. Homer manages to escape and return home, only to be greeted by Santa's little helper, who sprays gas on him and the rest of the family, who later wake up in a state of drugged-out bliss on the island. Then the scene fades to black and the credits roll. The Penal Island is a lengthy tribute to the bizarre 1960s British TV series The Prisoner, but this episode isn't established like many Simpsons Treehouse of Horror segments. For all viewers know, the real Simpsons are still on that island. The Simpsons has been on the air for 30 years, and as time marches on, people pass away. Several longtime voice actors on the series have died, including Marsha Wallace, who voiced Springfield elementary teacher Edna Krabappel, and Russi Taylor, who voiced twins Sherry and Terry and nerd Martin Prince. Simpsons writers have approached how to handle character departures of deceased cast members in different ways. When Wallace died, Mrs. Krabappel died too, and her death was noticed and mourned, in particular by her husband Ned Flanders. When Taylor passed on, her child character survived, voiced by new cast member Greg Delisle Griffin. Of course, the first big death on The Simpsons came when Phil Hartman passed away in 1998. Producers opted to instantly retire his recurring characters, washed-up B-movie actor Troy McClure and Simpson family attorney Lionel Hutz. Writers simply didn't include the characters anymore, and neither was ever mentioned again. While we know the tragic details of Hartman's passing, the fates of these characters have never been discussed. The Season 7 episode, Much Ado About Nothing, takes on the issues of immigration, or rather how politicians blame government shortfalls on illegal immigrants. In Springfield, this transpires when a bear patrol leads to a tiny tax increase, which upsets the citizens so much that Mayor Quimby blames the new tax on immigrants. Voters then decide on Proposition 24, which would immediately deport every illegal immigrant living in Springfield. In fear of the measure passing, Quickie Mart owner and operator Apu frantically studies for the citizenship test. Bartender Mo is also shown taking the test, as is stereotypical Italian chef Luigi. Apu passes, and Mo and Luigi presumably do too, as both remain in town when Prop 24 passes in a landslide. However, the episode ends with a resentful groundskeeper Willie on a boat, dressed in the style of a 19th century European arriving at Ellis Island, sailing away from Springfield. Nevertheless, Willie is present in later episodes. It's unclear how he was able to return to town and his job so quickly and easily. It's not clear if he took a citizenship test or arranged for legal immigration, or if he somehow snuck back into Springfield from Scotland. The Simpsons has always been a satirical show, holding an animated mirror up to society to point out its ills and make fun of them. One target the show never tires of are big corporations that do bad things. Homer works for the Springfield nuclear power plant, where skirting environmental law in the name of profits for owner Mr. Burns is the norm. As a result, Springfield is a massively polluted and politically corrupt wasteland, where the power plant dumps toxic waste wherever it wants, while the local government gives only the occasional small fine. One of the earliest episodes finds Burns' gubernatorial campaign sidelined by a three-eyed fish caught in a waterway polluted with waste. Toxic pollution is just a part of life in Springfield, but is exposure to chemicals why all the residents have sickly yellow skin, bulging eyes, and 4 fingers on each hand? Is it why they don't seem to age in a normal way? There certainly have been even more ways that nuclear waste has profoundly altered the lives of the residents of Springfield, and we're just waiting for The Simpsons to answer those burning questions.
For more than 30 years, The Simpsons has skewered every major player in the pop culture landscape, including Marvel. While some of these superhero jokes are obvious, others aren't quite as easy to spot. Here are some Marvel references in The Simpsons that you might have missed. One of the earliest and best Crusading Lisa episodes of The Simpsons is Lisa vs. Malibu Stacy. In this classic episode, the sensitive, political, and staunchly feminist middle Simpson child strikes back against the manufacturers of a Barbie-like doll called Malibu Stacy. In the past, Lisa was a huge Malibu Stacy fan and collector, but she becomes deeply offended by a new talking version of the doll. It has a voice chip that delivers an assortment of stereotypical phrases such as, "Let's make cookies for the boys," and "Don't ask me, I'm just a girl." Malibu Stacy also utters this line, which further pushes Lisa to the edge.
"Let's buy makeup so the boys will like us."
At this point, Lisa rants to the other girls about her issues with the doll. A confused classmate admits there's something wrong with her Malibu Stacy.
"My spidey sense is tingling. Anybody call for a web slinger?"
This, of course, is one of the phrases used by the Marvel Comics character Spider-Man. It's also a much more obscure reference to an early 90s activist group called the Barbie Liberation Organization. This group secretly replaced the voice chips of Mattel's Teen Talk Barbie, which said things like, "Math class is tough," in favor of sayings from talking G.I. Joe action figures like, "Eat lead, Cobra," and plenty of other bad battle-ready expressions. The Simpsons has always been loaded with sight gags that only pop onto the screen for a second or two, making plenty of these jokes easy to miss. And whenever the Simpsons family heads to a movie, viewers should keep a sharp eye on the marquee outside the theater because there are likely to be a few clever takes on popular film titles. Of course, Marvel has had more than a few of its comic book characters and movie titles twisted by the writers of The Simpsons. For instance, in the 2004 episode The Ziff Who Came to Dinner, there's a brief shot of the theater's marquee, offering such era-specific fake films as The Fashion of the Christ, Eating Nemo, and The Unwatchable Hulk. The last one is a sly reference to the 2003 Hulk film, the first appearance of the angry green guy on the big screen, which was far from a hit with the critics. Similarly, in a 2018 episode, The Simpsons go to see a film at the capital city Googleplex, along with titles like Transformers, Fatigue, and the Lego Get Out movie. There's a film called Marvel: Letters to the Editor, a dig at how the company has used seemingly everything from its comics canon as movie fodder. After watching a Marvel film, The Simpsons stick around for the credits, which mention that Mark Ruffalo, who plays the Hulk, has an anger coach, and that Stan Lee was created by Stan Lee's parents. However, as we all know, Marvel movies are never really over when the credits start to roll, and this animated parody is no exception. The Simpsons make fun of the MCU's love of mid-credit and post-credit sequences that reveal huge plot twists and whet audience appetites by setting up future movies. Marvel: Letters to the Editor has a mid-credit scene that brings a beloved character back from the dead. In this case, it's Peter Parker's Uncle Ben, only now he's unspeakably evil and revealed as the film's villain. After that, there's yet another sequence which sets things up for an Avengers-like movie featuring the Assemblers.
Who the hell are you? I'm assembling a team of the best team assemblers in the world, and I want you to help me put together that team.
Plenty of Marvel movies have been origin stories, such as the 2002 Spider-Man, which tells how Peter Parker became a web-slinging, wall-crawling superhero, and many elements of this Sam Raimi film are gently parodied in Simple Simpson, a 2004 episode which serves as the origin story for Homer's short-lived superhero identity, Pie Man. It all starts at the county fair, where Lisa enters a table-setting contest. Unfortunately, the judge, an obnoxious rich Texan, thinks her project stinks like the south end of a northbound mule, and goes about humiliating her for his own entertainment. When Homer sees his daughter being mocked by the judge, he becomes angry to the point of violence. However, remembering that Chief Wiggum told him he'd go to jail if he committed another felony assault, Homer takes another path to vengeance. He steals items from various fair booths and fashions them into a crude superhero outfit, announcing himself as Pie Man, and avenges Lisa by throwing a pie in the rich Texan's face. Before Homer can right any other wrongs, he needs a proper pie costume. The episode then launches into a montage of Homer drawing up ideas for his Pie Man look, then dutifully sewing one together that doesn't look quite as good as what he'd probably imagined. The whole thing is reminiscent of Peter Parker creating his own less than stellar first outfit in Spider-Man. This Simpsons episode has another big reference to the film with an upside down kiss between Pie Man and Marge.
I'm looking up your nose, but I feel like I'm staring into your soul.
Mona Lisa from 2006 is a truly classic episode of The Simpsons in that it gives viewers its signature mix of references to highbrow interests and accessible pop culture. Renowned authors Jonathan Franzen, Michael Chabon, Tom Wolfe, and Gore Vidal make voice cameos, while there's also an extended sequence involving a side character from the Spider-Verse, specifically as he was presented in the first trilogy of Spider-Man movies. During the episode, Lisa discovers that Mo the bartender is a dark, sad, everyman poet in the vein of Charles Bukowski, and she sends his work to the literary journal American Poetry Perspectives. And who happens to be the magazine's editor? It's none other than J. Jonah Jameson, who's apparently moved on from his job at the helm of the Daily Bugle.
I need photos of Spider-Man.
This is a poetry journal.
Okay, then poems about Spider-Man.
Jameson is voiced by Academy Award-winning character actor J.K. Simmons, who portrayed him in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, as well as Spider-Man: Far From Home. References to comic books and its surrounding culture have been part of The Simpsons for decades, even back when collecting comics was a relatively niche pastime. Bart Simpson and Milhouse regularly visit Springfield's comic source, the Android's Dungeon and Baseball Card Shop, run by the usually arrogant and dismissive comic book guy. However, in the episode Beware My Cheating Bart, two of Springfield's young residents wind up at the store not for comic books, but for a romantic refuge. The trouble starts when neighborhood bully Jimbo forces Bart to escort his girlfriend Shauna to places he doesn't want to go, and the two develop romantic feelings for each other. After they're caught kissing at the public pool, Bart and Shauna hide from Jimbo and his bully friends at the Android's Dungeon. Comic book guy greets them with words that would make any Thor fan feel at ease.
Think of this as your personal Asgard, and I, the all-seeing Heimdall, guardian of the gate.
That's 3 references to Norse mythology in one sentence, but since this is comic book guy, it's safe to assume that he's referring to the Norse mythology-inspired world of Marvel's Thor. But wait, there's one more Marvel reference in this scene. After Shauna makes fun of comic book guy's weight, he alerts Jimbo and the bullies where she's hiding. Shauna then starts a flame war with him, and he drops a classic Marvel line.
Oh, flame on!
Even casual fans will recognize "Flame on" as the catchphrase of the Human Torch from the Fantastic Four. In Bart, the bad guy, Bart becomes the most powerful person in Springfield after he watches an advanced copy of the superhero saga Vindicators: Crystal War II Resurgence. He was able to view it on a laptop that he lifted from a drunk, passed-out star of the film. Now Bart can get anything he wants by threatening to reveal spoilers for the highly anticipated blockbuster. Clearly, the film is a send-up of Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame, complete with a powerful space titan and emotional cliffhanger. The episode starts with just about everyone in Springfield watching the first Crystal War movie. In the film's final climactic scene, the Thanos-like Chinos comes into possession of the Doomsday app, which he used to turn the protagonists into crystals that shatter. Like Infinity War, the Crystal War films are overloaded with superheroes, most of which have easily identifiable Marvel counterparts. For instance, there's the Simpsons version of Iron Man, Magnesium Man, who is always ready with a witty bit of dialogue. Another main character in the episode is Airshot. He's clearly based on Hawkeye, except instead of being an expert archer, he's mastered the pump-action airgun.
Yes, Airshot, pump that air gun! 5 pumps! Think of the pressure!
The episode is packed with visual references to recent Marvel movies, but it also throws in a musical nod to one of their films from the previous decade. During one scene, we hear the song "People Get Up and Drive Your Funky Soul" while Bart walks down the hall of his school. This is the same James Brown tune that accompanies Peter Parker's infamous strut down the street in 2007's Spider-Man 3. In Elementary School Musical, an episode from 2010, Krusty the Clown achieves the unthinkable. He wins the Nobel Peace Prize. However, it's all just a ruse to get him onto a plane, which lands at The Hague, where Krusty is arrested and is set to be tried by the International Court of Justice. He'll be released only if someone can find proof that Krusty has contributed significantly to culture in any way. Homer and Bart scramble to locate some kind of evidence of Krusty's artistic importance. After scouring the internet, they find a MyTube clip of the PBS educational show The Electric Company. The Simpsons version of the show features a character who seems to be inspired by Easy Reader, who was portrayed on The Real Electric Company by a young Morgan Freeman. Predictably, Krusty's appearance on the show goes completely haywire.
Gotta hide me. I slept with the lighting director's wife, and...
This is a deep Marvel cut, as a low-budget version of Spider-Man really did appear on The Electric Company in the 70s. The 2017 episode Springfield Splendor alludes to the title of the classic indie comic American Splendor, but on the whole, the episode satirizes all kinds of comic books and other properties they've spawned in recent years. After Lisa writes a confessional autobiographical novel called Sad Girl as art therapy, Comic Book Guy publishes it without her permission.
You published my private art therapy as a comic book?
Actually, it's a graphic novel. The distinctions are threefold.
Shut up!
However, the graphic novel becomes a hit, and Lisa is invited to be on a panel at Comic-Con. Like real-life pop culture conventions, attendees dress as their favorite comic book and movie characters. There's a brief shot of a fan wearing a cheap, ramshackle tree costume. Clearly, he's attempting to cosplay as Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy. Also, it looks like Stan Lee is in the background. Later in the episode, Lisa's Sad Girl gets turned into a musical, which is ostensibly a send-up of the graphic novel to Broadway success of Alison Bechdel's Fun Home. Also, the score for the Sad Girl live experience is the same score from the ill-fated Broadway musical Spider-Man: Turn Off the Dark. The late Stan Lee was basically synonymous with Marvel Comics. He was a lifelong cheerleader for the company where he helped invent dozens of legendary characters. It was only fitting that he turned in an extended cameo in a Simpsons episode that finds Bart becoming a major player in the comics business. After Bart visits the android's dungeon to get Comic Book Guy's opinion on a character he created, Lee offers up his own expert critique. When Bart returns to the store later, he notices that Lee is still hanging around. Comic Book Guy posits that Lee's mind is no longer in mint condition, which is illustrated when he's trying to convince a customer that an action figure of the Thing can fit into a much smaller Batmobile. Later in the episode, Homer becomes enraged after falling into an inflatable pool filled with green paint and is mistaken for the Hulk. When Lee sees this happening, he can't help but get involved.
I'm the Hulk.
Oh, please. You couldn't even change into Bill Bixby.
12 seasons later, a vision of Lee tries to convince Comic Book Guy to pursue the girl he loves. When he asks for help, Lee declines and says, "I can only watch, I cannot interfere." That's a subtle nod to a bit of dialogue spoken by the Watchers, the Marvel characters seen in Guardians of the Galaxy and Fantastic Four. However, when Comic Book Guy starts to lose his nerve, the vision of Lee returns to lend a helping hand.
Come on, Nudnik, ask her out.
You're interfering.
Hey, I'm 90 years old. I can do what I want.
The chalkboard gag in the intro to The Simpsons has become an iconic sight in TV comedy, and over the years, Bart Simpson has written a whole heap of words on that chalkboard. From controversial political statements to in-jokes to colorful innuendos, these are Bart's most savage chalkboard jokes. It's not easy being a teacher. Even putting aside the low pay and awful working conditions, you've sometimes got to deal with students like Bart Simpson. After all, Bart's penchant for stirring up trouble is the reason why he's perpetually writing lines in the first place. Time and again, he's ruthlessly attacked the faculty of Springfield Elementary School with smart-mouth remarks, devious pranks, and wisecracks. Bart's teacher, Edna Krabappel, has especially suffered at Bart's hands, as seen in his rather questionable remarks concerning her appearance in the intro for the episode The Ziff Who Came to Dinner. Other Bart chalkboard notes regarding Mrs. Krabappel include, "I will not call my teacher hotcakes, I will not mock Mrs. Dumbface, and I will not hide the teacher's Prozac." Bart has even remarked on Mrs. Krabappel's love life, such as when he was forced to admit that teacher was not dumped, it was mutual, and over 40 and single is not funny. Ouch. During The Simpsons' time on television, the show has become infamous for predicting the future. It mocked the idea of using chemicals found in gym mats as hidden fillers in processed foods all the way back in 1995, which grossly enough turned out to be true in 2014. Homer Simpson even got pretty close to guessing the weight of the recently discovered Higgs boson particle in 1998's The Wizard of Evergreen Terrace. But The Simpsons made one of its most notorious predictions to date in Bart to the Future, which originally aired in 2000. The episode takes place in the year 2030, when Lisa has just become President of the United States and is facing some economic difficulties thanks to the previous Commander-in-Chief.
As you know, we've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump.
Shortly after Trump's election to the presidency, the show referenced its own uncanny prediction with the chalkboard gag in which Bart writes, "Being right sucks." Many of Bart's chalkboard quotes are peppered with evocative innuendos and playful puns. He apparently couldn't stop talking about the 12-inch pianist in Marge Be Not Proud, and makes a nod to Sir Mix-a-Lot when he notes Sherry does not got back in Wild Bart's Can't Be Broken. Among some of his more colorful innuendos, you've got Bart vowing not to hang donuts on his person, promising not to make fun of Cupid's dink, and acknowledging that pork is not a verb. Bart also shares some of his rejected words of wisdom in 101 Mitigations, when he is seen writing chili fries do not go in like a lamb and out like a lion. But things get taken to the next level during the opening sequence for the episode Pray Anything, in which Bart scribbles out SpongeBob is not a contraceptive. Gotta give the kid credit for creativity, don't you? Bart certainly gets up to his fair share of shenanigans, and if the show's chalkboard gags are anything to go by, they don't all happen on screen. Over the years, some of Bart's prank-based chalkboards have included I will not yell fire in a crowded classroom, I will not yell she's dead during roll call, and the Pledge of Allegiance does not end with Hail Satan. He apparently harassed a blind person by promising to return the seeing eye dog in Whacking Day, and vowed he wouldn't put hot sauce in the CPR dummy at the start of Father Knows Worst. Bart has also expressed a rather more worrying side to his classroom antics, including writing, 5 days is not too long to wait for a gun, non-flammable is not a challenge, and hooligan is not a profession. One of Bart's most notable moments of chalkboard mischief hails from the episode Doe Canada. Bart writes "ha ha" on the blackboard, then hits it, which rotates to reveal Nelson taped to the other side. Who's laughing now? The writers on The Simpsons are no strangers to getting meta, and this is usually most noticeable during the show's opening sequences, and of course the chalkboard gags. For example, there's the time when Bart cut corners while writing I will not cut corners by only writing the line out 6 times and filling out the remaining lines with ditto quotation marks. He also slyly remarks this punishment is not boring and pointless in Camp Krusty, and writes I'm sorry I broke the blackboard on a whiteboard in Black-Eyed Please. In reference to how critics described South Park when it first aired, Bart writes I'm not Charlie Brown on acid in the Blunder years. He also poked fun at The Simpsons itself by writing I will not celebrate meaningless milestones when the show was airing its 100th episode. After Butterfinger canceled their Simpsons ad campaign because the brand had been the butt of some of the show's jokes, Bart responded by writing I will not bite the hand that feeds me Butterfingers. Then when The Simpsons hit the big screen and got their own movie in 2007, Bart promised not to illegally download this movie in its intro. He also joked that he will never win an Emmy in Homer's Barbershop Quartet, even though by that point the show had already won 9. Throughout 2020, the United States and the rest of the world faced the first waves of the COVID-19 pandemic. Seemingly overnight, countless people found themselves struggling to adapt to a new way of life. In an attempt to stem the tide, many offices went virtual, and so did schools. Parents everywhere suddenly found themselves trying to help their children navigate online classrooms and curricula. And from the looks of it, not even The Simpsons were immune to the chaos of the coronavirus pandemic. As a way to honor these drastic changes, The Simpsons modified its chalkboard gag for an episode that aired on April 19, 2020. During the intro to The Incredible Lightness of Being a Baby, Bart's classroom is empty and a single line on the board reads, School Online, a poignant nod to the dramatic events that would have resonated with students, parents, and teachers everywhere. Ralph Wiggum is one of The Simpsons' stranger and most endearing characters. Sure, he's a perfectly sweet little boy, but he's also incredibly odd and about as brainless as you can get.
That's where I saw the leprechaun. Right, a leprechaun. He told me to burn things.
Of course, Bart is well aware of Ralph's many quirks and is constantly teasing him for it, even during the show's chalkboard gags. In the intro to Fear of Flying, Bart writes, Ralph won't morph if you squeeze him hard enough. A reference to the color morphing stress balls that were popular at the time the show aired. One of Bart's more savage notes concerning his odd classmate can be seen in Apocalypse Cow, in which he writes, a person's a person no matter how Ralph. Class pets are a fun way to reinforce the lessons they're taught in school, as well as help students experience the responsibility of taking care of a small life. In fact, studies have also shown that pets in the classroom have positive impacts on student behavior, enhanced social interaction, and student attitudes. Not that you'd know it looking at Bart. Those poor hamsters. There have been a handful of class hamsters featured on The Simpsons over the years, including Nibbles, the hamster who bravely helped save those trapped inside the school in Skinner's Sense of Snow, and even made it to space and back in She of Little Faith. Regardless of their heroism, however, Bart has relentlessly mocked his class hamsters during the show's chalkboard gags. During the intro to Homer the Whopper, Bart writes, "The class hamster isn't just sleeping." And in Day of the Jackanapes, he notes, "The hamster did not have a full life. Yikes. Get in that ball and run for the hills, little hamster."
Godspeed, Nibbles. Godspeed. Nuts.
Being a parent is a massive blessing, but it can also be incredibly frustrating, and having a kid like Bart must make it even harder to exercise discipline. Still, that doesn't exactly excuse Homer's particular approach to parenting, that is, strangling Bart whenever he loses his patience. Luckily, this is just a cartoon, which generally makes Homer's strangulations more humorous than horrific. Still, this is one aspect of the show that hasn't aged too well over the last 30 years, and even though it's set in the context of the show's off-the-wall humor, it can still be a tough pill to swallow. And this problem is eloquently touched upon during the chalkboard gag for Frink Gets Testy, in which Homer can be seen writing "Strangling is not an effective parenting tool" as a smug Bart watches on. During the show's time on television, The Simpsons has stirred up plenty of controversy surrounding religion. One obvious example of this is Ned Flanders, who is a constant target for jokes about Christianity. But one of the more subtle ways the show has poked fun at religion over various episodes is through the use of Bart's chalkboard quotes. In the intro to The Burns and the Bees, Bart writes, "Jesus is not mad his birthday is on Christmas," and in Reality Bites he notes there was no Roman god named Farticus. But one of his darkest and funniest remarks comes during the intro to Dark Knight Court, in which Bart writes, "Jesus' last words were not TGIF." In a world like The Simpsons, mothers are the cornerstones of their households, and that goes doubly for Marge Simpson.
Mom, you're always trying to give me potatoes. What is it with you?
I just think they're neat.
But even though Marge loves Bart unconditionally, he can definitely make things difficult at times. Just take his attitude to Mother's Day, for example. Over the years, Bart has lambasted that particular holiday by writing things such as "Today is not Mothra's Day," "Eating my vegetables is not a Mother's Day present," and "Dirty clothes are not a Mother's Day gift." In the intro to Homer Scissorhands, he even writes, "I do not deserve a Mother's Day gift for being one badass mother." But hey, maybe it's not all that bad. During the intro to Ned and Edna's Blend, in one of his more lucid moments, Bart writes, "Call your mother during the commercials." During the 25th season of The Simpsons, executive producer Al Jean dropped a massive bombshell on fans that in the near future they'd be killing off a major character. The writers had initially planned for the death to take place later that season, but in the end they had to delay it until the show's 26th season. This delay only stirred the public's interest that much more, and for months, Simpsons fans were left in a state of deep suspense. Furious speculation and rumors circulated across the internet over who exactly the unlucky soul would be. Many suspected Krusty the Clown as being the doomed character, but when the episode Clown in the Dumps finally did air, it turned out his father, Rabbi Hyman Kristofsky, was the long-hinted character who would ultimately pass away. Playing up to fan speculation about the long-awaited episode, the show opens with an equally memorable chalkboard gag. In his typical ruthless fashion, Bart writes, "Spoiler alert, unfortunately, my dad doesn't die." Another major Simpsons character who passed away on the show is Bart's teacher, Edna Krabappel. During season 25, the actor who voiced the character, Marcia Wallace, passed away. As a humble way of paying respect to Wallace's memory, Bart's normally savage tone was tamed for the chalkboard gag opening the episode following Wallace's passing. In 4 Regrettings and a Funeral, a solemn-looking Bart writes just one line on the chalkboard: "We'll really miss you, Mrs. K."
In the interest of exercising our inner comic book guy, it's worth taking a look back at The Simpsons and examining some of the problematic moments that everyone, except the most nitpicky of Simpsons fans, were willing to overlook. In the season 9 episode, Lisa the Simpson, Lisa begins to fear that her gift of intelligence is failing her.
No, I can't remember my combination.
Look at my agriculture project. It's a piece of a cow.
When she complains to Abe, he tells her that every member of the Simpson family starts out smart, but then dramatically becomes dumber with age, sending Lisa into an anxious spiral that she fears she'll soon become oafish like her father and brother. When Homer realizes what his dad has done, he calls the extended family over, where they discover that the gene only affects the Simpson men. A female relative who's a doctor explains to Lisa that the defective gene is in the Y chromosome, meaning only boys get it, along with a rotund figure and a bald head. Although this makes Lisa feel better, it presents a plot hole in the form of Homer's previously introduced half-brother, Herb Powell. The product of an affair between Abe and a woman named Gabby, Herb was put up for adoption in Shelbyville. When Homer meets Herb for the first time as an adult, he's introduced as a highly successful businessman who put himself through Harvard and climbed the ranks to start his own automotive company. Herb is rich, intelligent, and successful. He's all the things that Abe's genes were supposed to go away as he got older. So the Simpson gene seemingly skipped Herb for unknown reasons. But Herb actually may not have missed the Simpson gene entirely. He was convinced to make a terrible car by his half-brother, Homer, and fell victim to short bursts of anger and clumsiness. And maybe by virtue of being adopted, some nurture helped counteract his nature. In the season 6 episode, Lisa's Wedding, the family attends a fair where Lisa stumbles upon a fortune teller and agrees to let the woman tell her a story of her first love. For the first time in the show's history, the audience is presented with a flash forward showing a 23-year-old Lisa embarking on a whirlwind romance with a young British student named Hugh Parkfield. Their wedding ceremony in Springfield is ill-fated after Hugh simply can't handle the oafish nature of Lisa's family. She calls off the wedding, but not before friends and family gather for the ceremony, including Maud Flanders and Edna Krabappel. Although it's the year 2010 at the time, 15 years in the future from the episode's air date, fans know that both characters met unfortunate ends while Lisa was still in 2nd grade. Maud was famously killed by a t-shirt blast that Homer provoked at a race car event when the velocity of the blow knocked her off the top of the raceway. That sent her husband, Ned Flanders, on a journey of grief in which he tried to figure out how to move on as a single father. The episode aired in 2000, long before Lisa's future wedding would have taken place. Ned would eventually move on with Krabappel, but when the voice actress who played her, Marsha Wallace, died in 2013, the show retired her character by killing Edna off-screen. As a result, both characters would not be able to attend 23-year-old Lisa's wedding. However, Lisa's wedding is about a possible future, not an actual one. So in that alternate timeline, both characters made it to 2010. In the season 12 episode, Homer subjects himself to medical testing after blowing the family's savings on a faulty investment. The doctors discover that Homer's complete lack of intelligence isn't biological at all, but rather the result of a crayon getting accidentally lodged into his brain after he attempted to stick an entire 16-pack up his nose as a child.
Mr. Simpson, this could be responsible for your subnormal intelligence.
Hey, I came here to be drugged, electrocuted, and probed, not insulted.
Homer's lack of intelligence was already explained through the Simpson gene as a genetic predisposition to stupidity. However, when he agrees to let doctors remove the crayon, his IQ shoots up significantly. The intelligence that Homer gains endears him to Lisa, but makes him a villain. Realizing that he can't handle the burden, Homer enlists the help of unlicensed surgeon Moe the bartender to insert a crayon back into his brain. Lisa briefly protests, but is subdued by a letter left behind by the intelligent version of her father. However, Marge and Bart are never seen reacting to his elective brain damage, and he now lives as an unintelligent burden on the rest of them. No one does a sensible thing and implores him to consider the long-term effects. Every moment of Homer's stupidity from that moment forward is not the charming oafishness of a cartoon character, but the choice of a selfish man with self-induced brain damage. Because The Simpsons has been on for 30 years without aging any of its characters, it's hard to pin down the time frame in which major events happened. The show typically only calls it out when it's played for comedy.
Cartoons don't have any deep meaning, they're just stupid drawings that give you a cheap laugh.
But all bets are off when it comes to the timeline of Marge and Homer's relationship. In 3 key episodes, it's revealed that Marge and Homer's courtship lasted through the 1980s, 1990s, and early 2000s. In the season 2 episode, The Way We Was, it's revealed that Homer and Marge met in 1974 while they were both attending Springfield High School. 1 season later, while telling the story of how Bart was born, it is implied that they conceived him after watching The Empire Strikes Back, which hit theaters in 1980. The two married while Marge was pregnant. However, in the season 19 episode That 90s Show, Homer and Marge tell their kids of how they briefly separated in the early 90s, still before Bart was born and they were married. In that time, Homer invented grunge music while Marge pursued a romance with a college professor, which would mean she was attending college more than a decade after graduating high school. All of that goes out the window in the season 29 episode, 3 scenes plus a tag from a marriage, when Homer and Marge reveal that Bart was born while they were living in Capital City in the early 2000s. When talking plot holes in The Simpsons, you really can't miss the reality-busting Season 9 episode, The Principal and the Pauper. In this episode, it's revealed that Seymour Skinner was actually an imposter named Armin Tamzarian. When Armin got in trouble with the law while living as a street punk in Capital City, he was forced into the army, where he met the real Skinner. After Skinner was presumably killed in action, Tamzarian went to Springfield to break the news to his mother, only to be mistaken for his mentor. Unable to break the bad news, he lived to Skinner for the next 20 years. The episode ends with the town allowing Tamzarian to continue as principal and agreeing to never speak of it again. But there's evidence that the man who says he's Tamzarian is irrefutably Skinner. In the Season 3 episode, Bart's friend falls in love, it's revealed that Seymour spent 18 months as a prisoner of war, and the Season 7 episode, Raging Abe Simpson and his grumbling grandson in The Curse of the Flying Hellfish, it's revealed that Skinner's grandfather, Sheldon Skinner, was in Abe Simpson's platoon in World War II. When Sheldon is shown in a flashback, he appears to be an unmistakable relative of the man who stole the Skinner identity. At one point in the series, it's revealed that Homer grew up on a farm off of rural Route 9. In subsequent episodes, the family used to produce dairy until Homer spooked all the cows one day as a child, and they stopped producing milk, and the rest of the land wouldn't grow anything. After they have a fight in Season 6, Homer and Abe accidentally burn the house down completely. They even embrace on the porch after an argument as the rest of the farmhouse turns to rubble behind them. But the old Simpson farm apparently doesn't stay burned down. In the Season 11 episode, E.I.E.I.D.O., Homer becomes obsessed with challenging people to duels. When he brazenly challenges a southern duelist, Homer makes a quick escape and brings his family to his old farmhouse, which is miraculously still standing with no explanation whatsoever. The episode simply continues on and sees Homer invent the refreshingly addictive tobacco crop that sprouted as tomatoes without ever letting the audience in on what happened with the fire. The prevailing theory to explain the reappearing Simpson farm is that the episodes actually happened out of order, and that the farm would still be standing while Homer prepares for his duel in the later episode. In the Season 6 episode, Fear of Flying, the Simpsons family earn themselves a free trip anywhere in the continental United States in exchange for their silence about Homer's gross incompetence while impersonating a pilot. They're thrilled, except for Marge, who freaks out before takeoff, revealing a lifelong fear of flying.
Let me off! 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 Let me off!
Marge then goes through therapy, where it's revealed that she was disappointed in her father at a young age after figuring out that he was a male flight attendant and not a pilot like she thought. She also had repressed memories of being poked in the eye while being fed by the airplane as a baby and a toy ride-on airplane blowing up, as well as a memory of being shot at in a cornfield by a low-flying plane. In the end, Marge is able to get back on the plane, but it overshoots the runway and lands in the water. However, what makes this a glaring plot hole is the fact that Marge flew without incident in the Season 3 episode, Mr. Lisa Goes to Washington. Not only does Marge accompany the family on a flight, but their particular flight was likely triggering for anyone with a fear of flying. Bart made his way to the cockpit and released everyone's oxygen masks as a prank. All the same, Marge handles the flight well. She's still over her fear later in Season 6, when the entire family travels to Australia. But this could be explained that the episodes are again out of order, and Marge being over her fear in the later episodes means therapy worked and stayed with her. In the Season 11 episode, Kill the Alligator and Run, the Simpson family inadvertently takes a trip to Florida during spring break. Homer gets wrapped up in the celebration and ends up accidentally running over the local community's mascot, an alligator named Captain Jack. The law shows up and the family is allowed to leave the state, provided that they never return. The episode ends with the Simpsons crossing Florida off a map of states they've been banned from re-entering. But their expulsion from Florida apparently doesn't last forever. In the Season 14 episode, Special Edna, the family accompanies Bart's teacher to Orlando after he nominates her for a Teacher of the Year award, and she subsequently wins. The family travels to and from the fictional Epcot Center without incident. And in the Season 15 episode, Catch 'Em If You Can, Homer and Marge make the hasty decision to go on a second honeymoon to Miami, prompting Bart and Lisa to come, accompanied by Abe. This certainly calls the end of their spring break adventure into question, as it was either based completely on lies or simply unenforced by the states. But the show, known for its satire, may be calling the state of Florida out for comedy's sake. It simply wouldn't be a good show if Homer Simpson wasn't able to try out one-off career opportunities every chance he gets. It does pose certain logistical problems for him, the family, and the show's sense of continuity. The series pokes fun at this plot hole in the Season 13 episode, Papa's Got a Brand New Badge, where Homer takes up a job as a private security business that is eventually granted full policing powers over Springfield. As Marge does her nightly hair routine, Homer discusses his many occupations.
boxer, mascot, astronaut, imitation Krusty, baby proofer, trucker, hippie, plow driver, food critic, conceptual artist, grease salesman, carny, mayor, grifter.
And he goes on and on listing many more, which raises the question, how has Homer quit his power plant job and subsequently returned so many times throughout the years? It could be theorized that Homer is simply bad at his job, and so low on the corporate ladder that no one notices his prolonged absences.
Cartoons don't have to be 100% realistic.
With nearly 100 Treehouse of Horror segments produced and aired at this point, some rank right up there with both the best ever moments on The Simpsons and perhaps even with the creepy tales that inspired them. Watch on to experience the very best Treehouse of Horror installments, if you dare. The uniting theme of Treehouse of Horror 2 is that if you eat too much Halloween candy, some bad dreams will definitely follow. Despite any warnings though, the Simpsons kids and Homer go overboard. So follows Bart's Nightmare, a parody of The Good Life, one of the most famous episodes of The Twilight Zone. The proud underachiever dreams that he can both read minds and manipulate reality with a thought. As a result, all of Springfield fears even having a negative thought about Bart, lest he deliver repercussions. He uses his power to fulfill even his most mundane wishes. For example, when Homer refuses to turn off a football game for the Krusty the Clown show, Bart makes Homer the game ball, and he flies into a goalpost. When an angry Homer tries to smash Bart with a chair, the boy mentally transforms him into a jack-in-the-box. Marge tires of the fighting and sends the two to Dr. Marvin Monroe for some much-needed family therapy, and the doc tells Bart and Homer to spend more time together. That leads to a montage of wholesome activities that's hilariously out of place in a Halloween episode, complete with fishing, baseball, and church. The positive attention from Homer, which he may desperately need in regular life, renders his powers less effective and brings them together for some genuine fatherly affection. That's so horrifying to Bart that he wakes up screaming. Maybe they should try that therapist in real life. Bart Simpson has always been a troublemaker, and in the 8th season Treehouse of Horror segment, The Thing and I, Simpsons writers provided a logical reason why Bart is so bad. He's evil. It all starts when Bart and Lisa hear spooky monster noises in the attic, and they're only more curious when Homer carts off a bucket of fish heads to feed something he calls it. That it turns out to be a he, and he escapes its shackles among the attic's many unsold copies of B. Sharp's records and Homer's autobiography. Finally, Marge, along with Dr. Hibbert, clues in the kids, explaining that Bart was born as part of a pair of conjoined twins, and that the other one, which they named Hugo, was pure evil. A fact confirmed by medical science.
But what to do with poor Hugo? Too crazy for Boys Town. Too much of a boy for Crazy Town. The child was an outcast.
The only solution was for the Simpson family to embrace the time-honored traditions of Gothic horror and chain evil Hugo in the attic, occasionally feeding him some fish heads. That's when Hugo returns, with plans to sew himself back to his twin, only for Dr. Hibbert to save the day. Well, not for Bart, as the doc realizes that Bart was the evil twin all along and then forces him into a life as the secret, restrained attic child and grants the weird, maladjusted Hugo his freedom. I Know What You Did, Italy, Italy Did parodied the trendy teen horror movies of the late 90s, particularly, and obviously, I Know What You Did Last Summer. If you missed it, that movie concerns a group of young people who accidentally run a guy over and cover it up, only to be haunted by the dead man. The Simpsons version opens with a misdirect, as the Simpsons drive along a twisty road on a foggy night, having already escaped vampires who'd stolen their Super Sugar Crisp, obviously, but it just so happens that they're driving down the same road where neighborino Ned Flanders is enjoying one of his famous fog walks, and that's where Marge hits him.
We've got to go to the police. Oh, they'll never believe a Simpson killed a Flanders by accident. Even I have my doubts.
Instead of calling the authorities, Homer engages in a twisted round of Weekend at Bernie's recreation, hauling around Ned's rotten corpse to stage a fake death and take the heat off of Marge. After the funeral, where Homer basically confesses, the family is haunted by a man in a raincoat with a hook, and they flee to a series of spooky horror movie locales until the mysterious stalker reveals himself. It's Ned, of course. But it turns out Marge didn't kill him after all. He was never dead, because he's already undead, having been turned into a werewolf earlier that night. The moral of the story? Stay out of the dang fog. In this segment from the 6th Treehouse of Horror special, The Simpsons ramps up the satire, skewering the crassness of outdoor advertising while also taking Homer to task for his gluttony. When he buys a colossal-sized donut at Lard Lad that turns out to be only slightly larger than a regular pastry, Homer gets so angry that he steals the giant metal donut held aloft by the store's 50-foot-tall mascot statue. Unfortunately, this act of vandalism coincides with an ionic disturbance, which jolts Lard Lad and other massive, tacky advertising characters to life, including parodies of Mr. Peanut, the Pep Boys mascot, and even the Simpsons' own Kent Brockman. Needless to say, these commercially motivated horrors immediately wreak havoc on Springfield, devastating the town in revenge for Homer's theft. The police are no help, of course. In a joke that feels way too grim for the Simpsons, Chief Wiggum shoots at the first tall thing he sees, which turns out to be a high school basketball player. It's up to our favorite family to set things right, so Lisa consults an old advertising executive who explains that since the mascots are commercials, the only way to stop them is by ignoring them. They further enlist the aid of 60s pop crooner Paul Anka, who writes an anti-ad jingle to convince Springfieldians to just don't look, fighting the ads with ads of their own. The tactic works, and the raging monsters fall over and die, right onto the orphanage and children's hospital, crushing them in the process. The moral of the story? You can't win them all. Even the scariest of the Treehouse of Horror segments lean on the comical side. From what we can tell, a ratio of 3 parts funny to 1 part scary seems to roughly approximate the Simpsons writers' formula. However, every so often, one of these Halloween installments is downright scary, if not gruesome. Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace is both of those things, and still manages to be funny. Bart dreams that a Freddy Krueger-esque rake-wielding groundskeeper Willie tries to kill him, and he wakes up with rake wounds on his chest. He learns that Lisa and the other kids at school were similarly attacked with maintenance equipment in their dreams, while poor Martin is choked to death by Willie's giant tongue during a desk nap about Latin conjugation. Marge finally clues in the kids that Willie is indeed trying to eliminate the children of Springfield Elementary in their dreams as revenge for the parents who callously looked on when he burned to death in a furnace mishap during a budget meeting held on the spookiest day of the Simpsons calendar, March the 13th. That's when Bart heads into his dreams to force Willie into a fight to the bitter end, leading to a terrifying scene featuring eerie green skies, spooky music, and Willie taking the forms of both a monster tractor and a horrifying combination of bagpipes and a giant spider. Fortunately, the frequently unsung Maggie plays the hero, saving the day by plugging Willie's bagpipe exhaust pipe with her pacifier. The story of selling one's soul to the devil in exchange for worldly abundance is an old one, but The Devil and Homer Simpson, a parody of the classic short story and film The Devil and Daniel Webster, definitely puts its own spin on things. Homer is so desperate for a donut that he offers to sell his soul for one. Immediately, Satan appears, and in a big twist, it's the ultra-pious Ned Flanders. Homer signs the deal, stipulating that Satan gets his soul the moment he finishes the donut, and while he tries to get out of it by leaving the last bite untouched, it's just too devilishly delicious to resist.
Forbidden donut.
Hell's finest torturers try to dish out one of the usual ironic punishments for gluttony by forcing Homer to eat an endless amount of donuts, but for Homer, that's closer to heaven. Eventually, at Lisa's behest, Homer gets a trial. In the end, it's Satan Flanders who gets the ironic punishment, as Homer's gluttony saves his soul. See? On the back of his wedding photo? Taken in a hospital because he ate his entire wedding cake before the wedding? There's a love note he wrote to Marge, in which he already pledged his undying soul to her. As a result, Homer doesn't go to hell, but he does wind up with his own head turned into a donut, which he has a tough time not eating. While many Treehouse of Horror segments focus on the deadly sin of gluttony, Fly vs. Fly concerns sloth, In this installment, Homer buys 2 walk-in matter transporters at Professor Frank's garage sale and uses them to be lazier than ever. He places the transporters at the top and bottom of stairs to avoid 5 seconds of exercise. Then he goes even further, first by using it to get a beer without getting up from the couch, and then by using the machine as a shortcut to the bathroom, and not for his whole body. Things really go wrong when Bart sneaks downstairs in the middle of the night to experiment with the machines, and Snowball 2 and Santa's Little Helper head into one device, emerging as a 2-headed cat dog and a 2-bottomed monster, respectively. When Bart sees a fly enter the transporter, though, he proves that he's been reading too many comics by imagining himself transforming into a muscular flyboy hybrid superhero named Superfly. Instead, well, it goes a little more like it did with the family pets. Fly-headed Bart loves his new life of feasting on sugar and syrup and tries to permanently replace both Flybody Bart and Lisa. Finally, Monster Bart eats Little Bart and gets shoved into a transporter, restoring Bart to his regular state. And everything goes back to normal for the family. Of course, Homer does threaten to chop Bart up with an axe because he dared to mess with his dad's new toys without permission. But, like we said, back to normal for The Simpsons. Springfield Elementary is a woefully underfunded and poorly run school, and that's rarely illustrated better than it is in Nightmare Cafeteria. The detention room is overpacked, and lunch lady Doris has resorted to using grade F meat. So Principal Skinner comes up with a monstrous solution that solves both problems: kill, serve, and eat the misbehaving children. The teachers are nothing but amused when they taste their first round of sloppy Jimbos. German exchange student Uter likes them too, but Skinner finds an arbitrary reason to send him to detention, simply because the kid looks so tasty. Sure enough, the next day, the school is eating Uterbraten, and Skinner accidentally admits the whole cannibalism gambit to Bart and Lisa.
In fact, you might even say we just ate Uter and he's in our stomachs right now.
What's maybe even more horrifying is that Marge refuses to help the kids, utilizing this as a teaching moment to encourage them to stand up for themselves and refuse to be eaten. Despite groundskeeper Willie's ill-fated attempts to intervene, Skinner and lunch lady Doris corner the Simpson kids in Millhouse, and our young sitcom kids experience a surprisingly grisly end. Fortunately, it was all just another bad dream that Bart was having. Unfortunately, in the waking world, there's a fog going around that turns people inside out. And so, this Treehouse of Horror episode ends with a double fake-out, and the skinless Simpson family performing an incredibly gross musical number that reveals Marge's hair has muscles and veins. Classic Simpsons.
Like so many other Simpsons characters, Maggie is fully realized and comes with her own unique set of quirks. Although she can't walk more than a few steps without falling and rarely speaks, she is one of the show's most beloved characters. Here are just some of Maggie's many great moments. One of the biggest television news stories of 1995 parodied the biggest television news story of 1980. The 6th season of The Simpsons ended on a cliffhanger: who shot Mr. Burns? And the 7th season opener promised to end months of speculation, much like the Who Shot JR publicity stunt pulled by the primetime soap Dallas more than a decade earlier. It's assumed that Burns' loyal assistant Smithers committed the act. Before descending into a boozy stupor, Smithers remembers feeling the need to stop Burns, and he later finds a discharged pistol in his coat pocket. Police only have 2 witnesses to the crime: Santa's Little Helper and baby Maggie, who reveal nothing in an interrogation because, well, they can't talk. However, that may be out of a desire to not self-incriminate. Mr. Burns emerges from a coma and identifies the shooter as Maggie Simpson. What happened was that the awful old guy literally tried to steal candy from a baby. In this case, it was Maggie with a lollipop. He fought her for it, and in the struggle, his gun fell out of its holster, landed in Maggie's hands, and accidentally went off. While recovering in his hospital bed, Burns insists that Maggie be arrested. However, Chief Wiggum knows better.
Yeah, right, Pops. No jury in the world's gonna convict a baby. Maybe Texas.
Each member of the Simpson family has a few distinguishing characteristics. For example, Bart is a troublemaker, Marge is totally square, and Maggie doesn't speak. That's partially a function of her being a baby, but a whole lot of comedy can be mined from a character who's very intelligent but stays silent. However, Maggie does speak from time to time, and it's on such rare occasions that when it does happen, it's a certified TV event, with a big celebrity lending their voice to the role. The 1992 flashback episode Lisa's First Word features Lisa as a newborn baby, and it ends with Homer putting Maggie to bed and quipping that he hopes she never talks so that she'll never talk back to him. After he leaves, Maggie delivers the magic moment.
Daddy.
Making Maggie's first word even more impressive is that it was voiced by guest star Elizabeth Taylor. Then, in the 1994 Treehouse of Horror segment, Time and Punishment, Homer careens through different realities, landing in one where Maggie kills groundskeeper Willie with an axe. And that's when she speaks again, only this time in the voice of James Earl Jones.
This is indeed a disturbing universe.
Marge finally cracks under the stress of managing a household and raising 3 kids with no help from her husband in the 1992 episode Homer Alone, necessitating a trip to Rancho Relaxo.
Remember, you can't spell relaxo without relax.
But Marge doesn't trust Homer to watch the children for even a couple of days, and she shuttles Bart and Lisa off to the sad apartment of Aunts Patty and Selma. However, Maggie is smart enough to know that's a bad scene, and she refuses to leave home. Despite Marge's reservations, Maggie stays with Homer. She was right to worry though, because Homer and Maggie are lost without her. Maggie is just a baby after all, and she doesn't understand why her beloved mother suddenly disappeared, albeit temporarily. So after Homer puts her to bed and almost immediately trashes the house with Barney, she crawls out of her crib, out through the doggy door, and into the Springfield night in search of Marge. On the surface, this is a plot about a baby wandering the streets in the wee hours, but it's not too troubling because The Simpsons is a family cartoon and Maggie is surprisingly self-sufficient. The running gag for most of the episode is that Springfield is full of things and people that look like Marge and get Maggie's hopes up, including a shrub, a giant ice cream cone sign, and a guy in a Beefeater hat working at a British-themed quick lube business.
Lube job while you white?
Don't touch me.
As the youngest, least mobile, and almost completely silent member of the Simpsons family, Maggie is rarely the center of a main plot or subplot of an episode of The Simpsons, a show that, despite being animated and where time doesn't pass and people don't age, trades in realism. However, Maggie gets her rare chance to take center stage in a delightfully surreal way during the 2015 episode Puffless. Closer in form to one of The Simpsons-themed theatrical shorts, the episode's secondary plot, known as Maggie's Extraordinary Animal Adventure, is a self-explanatory, self-contained lark in which Maggie makes friends with a squirrel outside of her bedroom window, which is her entry into a secret world of adorable critters, including an owl, a possum, and Duffman's pet parrot. Maggie takes charge and saves the day when local yokel Cletus traps the opossum so he can cook him up and feed him to his large family.
Hey, Brandy! I caught us a possum! You want to name it before we eat it or after?
During!
Thanks to Maggie, the friendly opossum is freed after a full-on assault from the Springfield animal community. And it's all done without anybody speaking a word, which is great news for Maggie and the animals, but it's a serious disappointment for Cletus's kids.
Okay, well, possum's gone. But you got fingernails to chew on. Who knows what's under them?
The 1992 episode Brother, Can You Spare 2 Dimes staged a reunion between Homer and his half-brother Herb Powell. He was left homeless and eating out of garbage cans after Homer's failed car design bankrupted his automobile company. So how does Maggie play into this narrative? Well, The Simpsons was barely into its 3rd season, but it hit so big and thoroughly that fans were already clamoring to find out what was on the mind of the baby of the family. They got their chance when Uncle Herb, in an attempt to restore himself to a wealthy lifestyle, invents a machine that translates baby talk into plain English. He does it with the help of a $2,000 investment from Homer. The almost always silent Maggie talks a lot in this episode, or at least she babbles like a typical baby. But thanks to Herb's brilliant invention, everyone can finally understand the complexities of Maggie's deepest thoughts.
I have soiled myself. How embarrassing.
Through a series of strange events and misunderstandings, a 1995 Simpsons episode finds the county visiting Homer and Marge's home and deciding that they're unfit parents. The kids are immediately placed in a child welfare van and driven to a foster home.
Yay!
Haley ho!
Hello! Welcome to your new home, Neglectorinos!
While the episode is primarily a Bart and Lisa adventure, focusing on the two older Simpson kids as they miss their parents and struggle against the creepy vibe of Flanders' TV-restricted environment, Maggie shines in a big way throughout the story. She's the reason government agents ultimately decide to reassign the Simpson kids, as she's found wearing a sign Bart originally placed on Lisa's back reading, "I'm a stupid baby." And one of the big twists of the episode is that Maggie really responds well to her new lifestyle, relishing in the attention bestowed on her by the Flanders. At one point, she even removes her pacifier so she can babble and call Ned Daddly Doodly. Luckily, the spell is broken when she finally sees her mom.
Oh, Maggie, you're a Simpson again.
1992's A Streetcar Named Marge finds Marge starring in a community theater's musical version of the extremely dark Tennessee Williams play A Streetcar Named Desire. But because Homer is such an oafish lout, she has to bring Maggie along to rehearsals. After Maggie disrupts an intense scene between Marge and Ned Flanders, the play's director Llewellyn Sinclair forces Marge to drop her off at his sister's daycare center, the Ayn Rand School for Tots. Inspired by the philosophies of Rand, Sinclair runs a harsh school that promotes stark individualism and encourages children to develop the bottle within, which includes confiscating all pacifiers. That's a big problem for pacifier-addicted Maggie, who tries sucking on her thumb, crayons, blocks, and anything else she can get her little hands on. Eventually, she attempts to break into the locker where the confiscated pacifiers are stored. However, she gets caught in the act and thrown in the box, a playpen equating solitary confinement. The centerpiece of the B-plot, a grand parody of The Great Escape, soon commences. Maggie brilliantly sneaks into the daycare center's vent system and lowers herself into Miss Sinclair's office with the string from a talking Krusty the Clown doll. She then grabs the keys to the pacifier locker and uses a makeshift zip line of her own devising to access the forbidden treasure. Despite the odds, Maggie's plan works even better than expected.
Maggie, time to go to the...
A 1997 episode of The Simpsons, My Sister, My Sitter, looks into how funny it can be when Maggie acts like an actual baby. At the beginning of the story, Lisa proves herself to be such a dependable and mature kid that she becomes a successful babysitter.
What do you say, Homer? Can Lisa babysit for my kids?
Please, please, please.
I'll have to ask her.
Homer and Marge even trust her to look after Bart and Maggie when they head off to the fancy grand opening of Springfield South Street Squidport Shopping District. The idea of younger Lisa in charge enrages Bart, and he sets out to make the night as bad as possible for his babysitter, refusing to eat dinner and getting ice cream all over himself. That fake tantrum provokes a real one in a stress-sensing Maggie, and Bart gives her ice cream to calm her down. One problem: it's coffee ice cream. It jacks up Maggie into a twitching, grinning, wide-eyed caffeine monster who crawls on the shower curtain rod, sprays talcum powder on Lisa, and runs off. After Bart knocks himself out, Lisa has to safely get the whole crew across town to Dr. Nick Riviera's sketchy clinic. Since Maggie is so thoroughly and hilariously agitated from the coffee, Lisa puts her in a cat carrier because she won't stop sticking her fingers in passed-out Bart's face.
And as a grim finale, she intends to drown that poor caged baby.
Maggie often seems to be off doing her own thing, and she's mentally and physically separated from her older, verbal family members. That idea persists in the many future set episodes of The Simpsons, in which Maggie is the only one in the family who's both successful and at peace with herself. Homer seems to die an awful lot. Bart winds up a destitute bar musician. Lisa is president, but stuck in bad relationships, all while Maggie is off living the life she wants to live and doing so as early as age 9. In future drama, she isn't home on Bart and Lisa's prom night. Instead, Marge shows off a moving photo of Maggie waving from a beach in Alaska. She doesn't speak a word, as is The Simpsons' way with Maggie. Audiences also don't hear a sound from 30-something Maggie in Holidays of Future Past, by which point she's become a world-famous rock star. Amusingly, future Maggie is also the eventual mother of a quiet baby who looks exactly like her mom.
So, who's the father? It doesn't matter.
Disney welcomed The Simpsons to its Disney Plus service in 2020 with a short titled Playdate with Destiny. In this completely dialogue-free story, Marge takes Maggie to Not Responsible for Injuries Park, where she meets a cute boy that viewers learn is named Hudson. At least, that's the name written on his diaper. It's love at first sight. As they hit the various park attractions, Maggie and Hudson imagine they're engaged in grand romantic activities, horsey spring riders becoming real horses, a drinking fountain doubles as champagne for two, and dining in Paris is, in reality, sharing sand in the playground. It all ends during a game of peekaboo, when Maggie is surprised and heartbroken to see Hudson's mom loading him into their car. After a goodnight moon-themed dream in which everything turns into Hudson's face, Maggie preps for her next playground date, only to find to her horror that Homer is on kid duty. Unfortunately, he takes her to a skate park because they've got a taco truck. The next day, Maggie doesn't take any chances and wrestles control of the car away from Homer and drives them to Not Responsible for Injuries Park. It's there that she finally reunites with Hudson for their first kiss. Well, more like a baby version of a first kiss.
The Simpsons has been around for so long, the series can be used to mark the passage of time. In fact, plenty of the show's current viewers were born after it debuted in 1989. If you're one of these fans, check out the most popular episode from the year you were born. The most popular episode of The Simpsons to air in 1989 was also the only one to air that year. Of course, we're talking about Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire, the very first full-length episode of what is now the longest-running show in primetime history. It's a classic Simpsons tale about Homer bumbling through life in order to make his family happy, and it's packed with relatable moments, hilarious disappointments, and cutting satirical humor. Early in the story, the Simpsons' Christmas celebration is put in serious jeopardy when power plant owner Mr. Burns chooses fat executive raises over holiday bonuses for employees. Homer doesn't tell Marge the bad news because he thinks he can dip into a big jar of money she has stashed in her hair. Unfortunately, Marge ends up using this emergency fund on laser skin surgery for Bart after he gets a tattoo when her back is turned. Forced to take on a second job for the holidays, Homer becomes a lackluster mall Santa. He only ends up earning $13 and decides to bet it all at the dog track, where he promptly loses everything. But fear not, this first Simpsons episode has a happy ending. After the race, the losing dog that Homer bet on jumps into his arms and Bart asks if they can keep him.
He's a loser! He's pathetic! He's a Simpson.
In 1990, The Simpsons was just about the hottest thing on television, and Bart quickly became the breakout star. So it's not surprising that he served as the centerpiece of the show's second season premiere, Bart Gets an F, which was also the most popular episode of the year. Appropriately enough, this installment forces Bart to reckon with his immature decisions and bad boy ways. After faking his way through a book report on Treasure Island, which he didn't bother to read, and cheating off of Milhouse on a test, the school psychiatrist tells Homer and Marge that it would be best for Bart to repeat the 4th grade. Dead set against it, Bart actually tries to improve his marks and gets class brain Martin to tutor him in exchange for popularity lessons. After forcing himself to study, Bart defies everyone's expectations and does well enough on a history test to pass, though he just barely scores a D-. Still, it was enough to earn his test a coveted place on the fridge right next to one of Lisa's mini A's. Viewers can pick up clues from early episodes of The Simpsons that Homer and Marge are in their late 30s and met at Springfield High School. The 1991 flashback episode, The Way We Was, provides a lot more detail by depicting the story of Homer and Marge's first days as a couple. The idea of a Simpsons episode set in the 70s featuring a young Homer and Marge was irresistible, and The Way We Was ended up as the most watched episode of 1991. Back in 1974, high school senior Homer lands in detention yet again for smoking in the boys' room. Studious Marge winds up there for the first time because she burned a bra at a feminist rally. When she walks into detention, it's love at first sight for Homer, and he immediately wants to ask her to the prom. To get close to Marge, he hires her as his French tutor, despite not actually taking that class. After an undeniable chemistry develops between them and she accepts his prom invite, he lets it slip that he lied about French class. Feeling betrayed, Marge goes to the prom with handsy nerd Artie Ziff instead, standing up a heartbroken Homer. At the end of an awful night for both of them, Marge picks up Homer off the side of the road, and they share their first fate-sealing kiss. While Lisa's first word prominently features Lisa as a baby, the real reason this is the most viewed episode of 1992 is that it was a huge milestone in the life of Maggie. In the run-up to this episode's airing, Fox heavily hyped the fact that Hollywood legend and Academy Award winner Elizabeth Taylor would guest star as the voice of Maggie. Towards the beginning of the story, the Simpsons move into their home on Evergreen Terrace, but that's just the first of many changes in store for the family. Bart is also forced to contend with a creepy clown bed that Homer made because he needs to give up his crib for the newly born Lisa. The new addition gets so much of his parents' attention that Bart starts acting out and threatens to run away, but he's stopped in his tracks when Lisa says her first word, Bart. At the end of the episode, the action returns to the present, where Homer puts Maggie to bed, telling her he's in no rush for her to speak because he doesn't want her to talk back. After he leaves the room, Maggie delivers the moment everyone was waiting for.
Daddy.
It's no secret that Homer is a man of simple pleasures, especially when it comes to alcohol. But in Duffless, the most popular episode of 1993, Homer pays the price for his endless love of beer. As the story begins, Homer sneaks out of work to take the Duff Brewery tour with Barney. Naturally, they both have a few samples, rendering Barney physically unable to drive. Homer, who didn't indulge as much as Barney, gets behind the wheel and is immediately busted by Chief Wiggum. Charged with drunk driving, Homer is stripped of his license and forced to attend Alcoholics Anonymous meetings.
My name is Homer, and I'm just here because the court made me come.
Homer, with our help, you'll never touch a beer again.
Marge, worried about Homer's addictive behaviors, thinks giving up beer for a month might be a good idea for him. He reluctantly agrees, and though it's extremely difficult, he eventually succeeds. In the process, he saves $100 and loses so much weight that he no longer sweats while eating. At the end of the month, Homer even resists his urge to down a few beers at the bar. Instead, he goes on a romantic bike ride with Marge. Let's just hope he didn't end up taking her to Moe's. The Simpsons' annual Halloween specials are a TV tradition that still endures to this day. In 1994, the phenomenon reached critical mass as Treehouse of Horror 5 ranked as the most viewed episode of the year. The episode starts with a parody of the horror classic The Shining, where Mr. Burns hires the Simpsons to be the winter caretakers of his remote mountain lodge, but he makes sure to get rid of all the beer and TV sets, sending Homer into a murderous rage. Then, in Time and Punishment, Homer tries to fix the family's toaster and accidentally turns it into a time travel device. After going back way too far and squishing a prehistoric insect, Homer zaps his way through various bizarre timelines created by his actions, including a Ned Flanders-ruled dystopia. The episode finishes out with Nightmare Cafeteria. In this segment, Principal Skinner helps lunch lady Doris figure out new ways to serve the kids on a budget.
Are you saying you killed Jimbo, processed his carcass, and served him for lunch?
While the owner of Springfield's nuclear power plant, Mr. Burns, is famously cruel, the 1995 episode Who Shot Mr. Burns Part 1 demonstrates just how low the wicked tycoon is willing to sink. After oil is discovered under Springfield Elementary School, bringing much-needed funds to the poorly resourced institution, Burns steals the lucrative crude with his slant drilling company. Not only does he destroy large parts of the town in the process, including the Springfield Retirement Castle and Moe's Tavern, he creates a monopoly on energy, forcing everyone in the region to get their power from Burns' sources. By the end of the episode, Burns has been shot by an unknown assailant and is barely clinging to life while sprawled out on a sundial. Of course, this is only part one of The Simpsons' most famous cliffhanger, which left the world wondering who shot Mr. Burns.
Well, I couldn't possibly solve this mystery. Can you?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot.
2 years after earning some of its biggest Halloween ratings ever, another Simpsons Fright Fest, Treehouse of Horror 7, scared up enough viewers to rank as the top episode of 1996. Some of the interest in this episode might have been influenced by that year's presidential race, which was between Bill Clinton and Bob Dole. The Simpsons, always a satirical show, made fun of both candidates in this Halloween special by having recurring alien invaders Kang and Kodos abduct the two men, take over their bodies, and run for president in their place. As the aliens point out, the United States has a two-party system, so Americans have to vote for one of them and then wind up enslaved. In the anthology episode's other segments, Lisa's tooth in a petri dish experiment leads to a rapidly evolving society where she is worshipped. And in the final story, the family confronts Hugo, Bart's monstrous twin brother, who's been kept chained up in the Simpsons' attic. Fox was responsible for more than a few hits that dominated pop culture in the 1990s, but only one dared cross over with The Simpsons, The X-Files. Bringing FBI agents Fox Mulder and Dana Scully to The Simpsons was at its core a publicity stunt, and it worked like gangbusters. The Springfield Files was the most popular episode of 1997. One night, a very drunk Homer walks home from Moe's Tavern and stumbles into the woods, where he comes face to face with something completely unexplainable, a wispy, glowing, big-eyed creature resembling popular depictions of aliens. News of the encounter reaches Mulder and Scully, and they journey to Springfield to investigate the mysterious sighting. Eventually, it's not the X-Files duo that cracks the case, but Lisa. She forces Smithers to come forward and explain that the presumed alien is actually the elderly and decrepit Mr. Burns. It turns out that his weekly life-preserving medical treatments leave him so confused and disoriented that he wanders around the woods. The glow is simply a side effect from working around nuclear power for so long. In Bart Carney, the best-performing episode of 1998, The Simpsons explore the sketchy world of traveling carnivals. When the carnival comes to Springfield and the family decides to check it out, Bart gets himself into trouble almost immediately. He hijacks a car that the carnival claims once belonged to Adolf Hitler and smashes it into a tree. To pay for the damages, Bart and Homer become carnies. Under the tutelage of father-son carny duo Cooter and Spud, the Simpson guys learn all about fixing games and bribing police, although Homer fails to properly pay off Chief Wiggum despite his many hints. This gets Cooter and Spud's game shut down, which is also where they live. Taking pity on them, Homer invites them to stay with the family. He soon learns that he shouldn't have trusted the two carnies. Before long, they temporarily assume ownership of the house and won't let the Simpsons back in.
You can't do this to me! What about the Carney Code?
In Maximum Homer Drive, the most watched episode of 1999, Homer is intrigued by a promotional stunt at a steakhouse. Whoever can eat a 16-pound steak with all the trimmings gets it for free. He then accepts a challenge from a long-haul truck driver named Red Barclay, who bets Homer that he can finish the huge meal before he does. Red is the first to polish off his steak, but in the process, he dies of what Dr. Hibbert diagnoses as beef poisoning. Homer, taking all the wrong lessons from this experience, decides there's only one thing to do: complete Red's last delivery with Bart by his side. Of course, he does this without knowing how to drive a big rig or understanding the culture of the road.
I want you to blow your horn.
Oh! That little punk!
It's a little surprising that it took until The Simpsons' 12th season for trickster Bart to become a professional con artist. Fans were apparently eager to experience this foregone conclusion firsthand, as The Great Money Caper was the top episode of 2000. At the beginning of the story, a sturgeon falls from a space station and crashes into the Simpsons' car. After that unexpected event, Bart and Homer decide to busk as a magic act so they can earn enough money to fix the family car. The scheme doesn't go according to plan, and the duo only earns 60 cents. Homer quickly loses his patience with Bart and drives away without him. When passerby take pity on the boy, he starts raking in the cash without having to do anything. After Bart takes a taxi home and buys himself a steak dinner, both Simpson guys realize that they could just grift people to earn money. No busking skills required. Naturally, it all goes bad, and eventually, Homer and Bart get caught by an FBI agent. But even that is a ruse. The agent is, in fact, an actor hired by Marge to teach Homer and Bart a lesson. The 2001 episode Homer attempts to explain why The Simpsons' dad has such a unique personality, to put it kindly. Fans were so eager to learn how he got to be so Homer-like that they made it the most watched episode of the year. After Homer gets a job as a medical test subject, doctors find a crayon lodged in his brain. It turns out that when Homer was a child, he shoved 16 of them up his nose. He thought that he had sneezed them all out, but one stubborn crayon stuck around for decades. After Homer has it surgically removed, his unencumbered brain finally works correctly. In fact, Homer suddenly becomes intelligent, cultured, and able to relate to brilliant Lisa for once. They even go to the library together. However, after a few ups and downs, Homer realizes that he was much happier when he was less intelligent. Luckily, Moe is more than willing to hammer the crayon back into his brain and restore Homer's previous level of intelligence.
Extended warranty? How can I lose?
Perfect.
Large Marge from 2002 is absolutely packed with silly sight gags, which helped it become the most popular episode of the year. For example, when Lisa wins a bet with Homer and gets to choose their daddy-daughter day activity, she has them build houses for domiciles for the destitute. They work alongside ex-presidents Bill Clinton, George Bush, and Jimmy Carter, who engage in Three Stooges-esque physical comedy and violent slapstick. Later at the worksite, Homer demonstrates to a couple women how Marge birthed Bart, only for her to drive by and think that he is flirtatiously flexing his muscles for them. Worried that Homer is losing his passion for her, Marge decides to get liposuction. Unfortunately, the surgeons mix up their patients and provide the episode with its central plotline and its most obvious sight gag.
What on earth have you done? My McGuppies became bazongas.
In 2003's I'm Spelling as Fast as I Can, two big events simultaneously passed through the greater Springfield area, a championship spelling competition and a mania for Krusty Burger's Ribwich. Of course, Homer gets addicted to the Ribwich, a sandwich whose meat source is couched in secrecy. He joins a group of ribheads who travel around to different Krusty Burger locations according to the sandwich's rolled-out release schedule. Homer's new adventure in gluttony comes to an abrupt end when Krusty announces that the Ribwich will be discontinued, as the animal from which it's derived has suddenly gone extinct. Meanwhile, Lisa quickly rises through the ranks of competitive spelling. In a surprise twist, writer George Plimpton asks Lisa to throw the finals to a more popular and marketable competitor named Alex. If she goes along with the plan, she'll receive a full college scholarship and a George Plimpton hot plate. Lisa, of course, sticks to her high morals and announces during the competition that she was asked to throw the contest. She then defiantly continues to compete. Sadly, she then misspells her word and knocks herself out of the finals. Still, her family is incredibly proud of Lisa and her second-place finish.
You're the number one speller in this car, or in that car, or in that car, or don't look at that car.
Building fighting robots is an ongoing pastime for thousands of people, but in the early 2000s, the pursuit enjoyed a mainstream moment with shows like BattleBots. The Simpsons tapped into this fad in 2004, and it paid off. The robot-themed story, I Do Bot, was the most popular episode of the year. After Homer does a terrible job of assembling Bart's new bicycle, he decides to make it up to him by constructing a BattleBot to compete on the TV show Robot Rumble. Homer's not the most talented engineer, however, and resorts to crafting a glorified robot costume. He places himself inside, then goes on television and suffers through many violent beatdowns until Bart finally discovers what his dad has been up to. But this doesn't stop Homer. He continues to fight until the truth finally pops out.
That robot has given birth to a man!
In 2005, Fox had the rights to the Super Bowl and gave The Simpsons the honor of airing a special episode right after the big game. That installment, Homer and Ned's Hail Mary Pass, seems like it was custom made to retain as many sports fans as possible. And it clearly worked, since it was the year's most watched show. When a video of Homer doing a victory dance after winning a carnival game goes viral, several prominent athletes hire him to choreograph their own celebratory dances. LeBron James, Yao Ming, Michelle Kwan, Warren Sapp, and Tom Brady all put in a request and are all voiced by their real-world selves. Homer's dances grow into such a cultural phenomenon that he wins a plum gig organizing the Super Bowl halftime show. He recruits Ned Flanders to help him out, seeing as how his pious neighbor has been making a name for himself by producing violent biblical films. For the big halftime show, Homer and Ned recreate the story of Noah's Ark for millions of football-loving fans. Of course, the reaction of the viewing public was pretty predictable.
All over America today, viewers were outraged by the Super Bowl halftime show's blatant display of religion and decency.
There are few evil characters who delight in their villainy more than Springfield's resident billionaire industrialist Charles Montgomery Burns. And today we're looking at the worst things that Mr. Burns has ever done in the long history of The Simpsons. In one of his most diabolical and high-profile acts of Bond-level villainy, Mr. Burns once constructed a giant disc designed to cast the entire town of Springfield in shadow for 24 hours per day. In effect, the plan was to force Springfield to rely on electricity supplied by his nuclear power plant rather than natural sunlight. The act proved to be the catalyst for the infamous Who Shot Mr. Burns, two-part mystery that saw the entire town outraged by Burns for plenty of other reasons. Earlier in the episode, the town turned on him after he tapped an oil well beneath Springfield Elementary, causing the school to lose funding and the town to be plagued by environmental disaster. The sunblocking plan, however, was so vile that even Smithers broke rank and had to walk away from his life with Burns.
I don't want any part of this project. It's unconscionably fiendish.
I will not suffer your insubordination.
And after announcing his nefarious plan to the entire town, who are now armed to the teeth, Burns might have thought he'd crossed the threshold from infamy to invincibility. But a swift shot from an unlikely townsperson put an end to that perception. Still, Burns blocking the sun remains among his most high-profile acts of villainy. It showed that he was okay with the entire town wanting him dead if it meant a few more bucks in his wallet. When The Simpsons returned for its 7th season, the finale of the Who Shot Mr. Burns two-parter revealed that it wasn't the grand villainous plan to block out Springfield's sun, or even any of his other considerable acts of greed that got him shot. Instead, it was an even more craven and petty act. Mr. Burns straight up tried to take candy from a baby. After appearing to conquer the sun, Burns felt even more invincible and entitled to do whatever he pleased. In his case, that meant stealing a lollipop from Maggie Simpson. Unfortunately for him, he was unaware that his pistol was precariously placed in its holster, and in the old man's struggle with the baby, the gun went off into his chest, giving him some much-needed comeuppance. In the episode The Trouble with Trillions, it's revealed that after World War II, President Harry Truman minted a $1 trillion bill in an effort to reconstruct post-war Europe. The US government then tasked a spry young Mr. Burns with flying the money to Europe. Surprise, surprise, it never arrived. Obviously, stealing an incomprehensible amount of money meant to help people after one of the most devastating pieces of human history alone has got to be one of Mr. Burns' worst acts. But wait, there's more. After Homer helps discover that Burns still has the bill, the FBI burst in to arrest him. But Burns manages to escape by fleeing the country. The second part of his escape plan? Buying a tiny little Caribbean island he found on a map. Unfortunately, that island happens to be Cuba, which some will note is kinda spoken for when it comes to land agreements. Armed with $1 trillion in cash, though, Burns attempts to just purchase the country from its president, Fidel Castro. Castro proves to be a little too cunning for Burns, though. He just asks to see the bill and then pretends it was never handed to him. With that, Burns returns to the States defeated. But like most super-rich criminals, he never actually faces any consequences. 2001 Greyhounds from the 6th season of The Simpsons is responsible for one of the better toe tappers in the show's long musical history. It's also one of Burns' most evil acts to date, especially if you're an animal lover.
He's gonna make a tuxedo out of our puppies. Na-na-na, na-na-na, na-na-na. Bart! Sorry, you gotta admit it's catchy.
When the Simpson family dog, Santa's little helper, gets a little frisky with another greyhound, the family finds themselves the proud yet overwhelmed owners of 25 puppies. Although they make a valiant effort to care for the dogs, they're forced to sell them. As they debate letting an oddly interested Burns take the whole litter, the devious tycoon steals them when their backs are turned. Fortunately, Bart and Lisa track them down at Burns Manor and hear him singing his plans to make the dogs into a tuxedo. It turns out he's been making clothes from adorable animals for years. That's bad enough to merit inclusion on a list of his worst acts. But doing in 24 puppies for the sake of fashion is a new level of evil. Fortunately, Bart and Lisa intervene before he can do his grim tailoring job, but Burns holds the two kids at gunpoint in order to stop them. In the end, Burns is convinced that he shouldn't off the dogs and vows to never wear the fur of another animal, as long as they can do an amusing trick. Sorry, gophers. This is a unique inclusion on the list because it marks a rare occasion in which Burns doesn't revel in his villainy. Instead, his bad behavior merely comes from a deeply misguided place. After a series of bad investments causes Burns to lose his vast fortune, the episode The Old Man and the Lisa sees him forced to live the life of an average Joe, even shacking up with Smithers for a brief period. However, his quest to find fulfillment as an impoverished elderly person is short-lived as his life quickly spirals out of control and lands him in the retirement castle. When Lisa Simpson comes around on a crusade to increase Springfield's recycling, Burns decides to mend his previously greedy ways by attempting to give back. It seems like things are going well, as Lisa's desire to help the environment meshes with Burns' business acumen. However, upon the opening of the Little Lisa recycling plant, Burns reveals that he's strung together hundreds of plastic six-pack holders to sweep the sea clean of both waste and marine life. In a horrific but very well animated shot, we see hundreds of animals being dragged from the ocean and turned into a meat slurry that Burns then sells.
And best of all, it's made from 100% recycled animals.
Lisa is obviously horrified, much to the confusion of Burns, who genuinely believes he merely took recycling to the next level. Although this is by far one of Burns' worst acts, it's scary to think that this kind of carnage is what happens when he goes with his best intentions instead of his worst.
The Simpsons has been around for a very long time, and while every episode brings with it new jokes, some gags have been recurring again and again for years. From odd geography to embarrassing photos, here are the best long-running jokes on The Simpsons. The Simpsons is a satirical comedy, which means that to strike as broadly as possible, it has to be set in the most average-seeming place imaginable. So, writers came up with Springfield, a mediocre town that's also full of goofballs and weirdos. So as not to impose any regional characteristics on the mid-sized city and keep it as down the middle and relatable as possible, the state where Springfield sits has aggressively never been revealed. All viewers really know is that its capital city is literally named Capital City, and that the governor is named Mary Bailey. Diligent Simpsons fans have looked for contextual clues for years, trying to pinpoint Springfield's exact location, but they'll likely never find it. It's physically and geographically impossible for Springfield to be a real place. Information about its locale is purposefully contradictory, and it's one of the show's best prolonged gags. In the Behind the Music parody episode, Behind the Laughter, Springfield's location is given as both northern Kentucky and southern Missouri. In The Simpsons movie, Ned Flanders says the town is nestled between such far-flung states as Ohio, Maine, and Nevada. In many episodes of The Simpsons, Homer mindlessly watches television and comes across an infomercial invariably hosted by aging, washed-up B-movie actor Troy McClure. McClure usually introduces himself by saying,
"I'm Troy McClure. You probably remember me from such films as The Revenge of Abe Lincoln and The Wackiest Covered Wagon in the West."
He then lists a couple of terrible-sounding old movies from his apparently vast resume of forgotten projects. Among his dozens of credits, we've got The Boatjacking of Super Ship 79, Dial M for Murderousness, Here Comes the Coast Guard, They Came to Burgle Carnegie Hall, and Gladys the Groovy Mule. Troy, voiced by big-voiced Saturday Night Live cast member Phil Hartman, got a lot of hosting work in the Simpsons universe as he also introduced hotel information videos, telethons, and TV specials, while listing his corresponding past credits. His work in educational films is particularly hilarious, with titles such as Earwigs, Ew, Lead Paint, Delicious but Deadly, and 2 minus 3 equals negative fun. The running gag comes full circle when the Simpson family actually meets Troy McClure and mentions the films they remember him from. Homer Simpson is a man of simple pleasures, but all the beer, donuts, and bad TV are offset by a strange fixation on goals he never has the drive to achieve.
Marge, you're standing in the way of my boyhood dream of managing a beautiful country singer.
The result? Homer has earnestly stated several times that a given aspiration is his boyhood or lifelong dream. Among those goals, there's his desire to manage a country music singer, to be a monorail conductor, own the Dallas Cowboys, be an inventor like Thomas Edison, live in the woods, and get rid of Bart. Whenever Homer brings up another steadfast dream, Marge almost always points out that he recently fulfilled his dream, like eating the world's biggest hoagie, running out on the field during a baseball game, or appearing on the televised talent contest The Gong Show, playing a huge harmonica with Barney while both were inside a giant pair of overalls. In recent seasons, Herman Herman, proprietor of Herman's Military Antiques, hasn't appeared all that often on The Simpsons. In the early days of The Simpsons, however, Herman was a predominant side character, a Springfield townie on par with the likes of Kent Brockman or Helen Lovejoy. And similar to those characters and their handful of defining traits, Herman had his whole thing too. Herman knows a lot about military history and strategy, and he's also rather paranoid. Physically, it's quite noticeable that Herman is completely missing his right arm. Viewers might presume he lost it in a long-ago combat skirmish, but that's not necessarily the case. Writers made a dark and ghoulish running joke out of just how Herman became separated from his appendage. In the 1990 episode, Bart the General, Herman claims that he stuck it out of the window of a moving bus and a passing truck tore it off. Years later, in the episode To Cur with Love, it's shown that Herman lost it while trying to hail a ride, and it was ripped off by Chief Wiggum driving an animal control vehicle. As it was in real life, there was a hotline for everything on The Simpsons in the 90s. And just like in the real world, the hotlines in the series would have such high call volumes that they put callers on hold and make them wait for a while, allowing time to pass with some soft rock hold music. The Simpsons mocked this phenomenon by making the wait music as savagely funny and on the nose as possible. For example, when Homer feels disconnected from Bart, he calls the National Fatherhood Institute for help, And while on hold, they play Harry Chapin's gut-wrenching absentee dad song, Cats in the Cradle. In another episode, when Marge leaves baby Maggie in Homer's care, she runs away. And so Homer phones a missing child hotline and quickly tears up when the hold music is players' Baby Come Back. Characters on The Simpsons coin a lot of words, and one of the best is retirony, a clever construction from the usually less than sharp Chief Wiggum that can be used to identify an especially durable running joke from The Simpsons itself. It's a combination of retire and irony, and Wiggum tells a financial planner in the 2000 episode Homer vs. Dignity that he doesn't have a plan for the future, because retirony will ensure he's shot and killed 3 days before he leaves the police force.
What if you don't get shot?
What a terrible thing to say.
The Simpsons' first use of the retirony concept is a direct jab at action movie cliches. In a 1991 episode, Homer watches a McBain movie in which the title character's just about retired partner is brutally shot by a hitman, all while the poor guy is holding a photo of his new boat, the Live Forever. Retirony was subsequently taken to absurd places. Homer smashes a news camera hidden in a hat, which had 1 day left until retirement. While searching for Homer, a police dog 1 day from retirement smells the man's underpants and runs away. And then Marge accidentally frees a group of prison inmates who Chief Wiggum notes were, quote, 1 day away from being completely rehabilitated. The triangular flags known as pennants seem like an old-fashioned form of showing fandom, since Mr. Burns was seen holding a Beat Harvard pennant after attending a game in the 1996 episode Burns Baby Burns. But the pennant gag is also a reliable staple for Homer Simpson. For years, Homer seemed to always have at the ready a professionally made pennant for every occasion, no matter how minor, inappropriate, or private the experience. He had an XFL pennant to watch the ill-fated football league's launch at home on his couch, one reading mid-season to greet the arrival of replacement television shows, a girth one to complement his Fat Pride t-shirt, and even one reading Justice that he held aloft from the sitting area of a courtroom. Initially conceived as a guy for Homer Simpson to play against, Lenny Leonard was both a work friend and drinking buddy to the main character of The Simpsons, a fellow mid-level employee of the Springfield nuclear power plant and a frequent customer of Moe's Tavern. And over the decades that The Simpsons has been on TV, Lenny's character and backstory has grown deeper. For example, viewers learned that he has serious eye health issues and very bad luck relating to those eye health issues. This all gave Lenny one of The Simpsons' grossest and funniest running gags. Some unknown injury left Lenny with a fragile peeper, and yet it's frequently attacked by the one ultra-specific thing his doctor has said to keep out of there. Homer throws a dish of pudding at Lenny, but he's not supposed to get pudding in that eye. He's wrestled to the ground on top of a jigsaw puzzle, even though he's not supposed to get jigs in his eye. Other times, Lenny and his poor eye are just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like when he takes off his eye patch for the allotted 5 minutes a day and fish guts get inside of it. Or then there's the time that Homer pranks him with the old snakes in a can bit, sending a spring right into his cornea. The Springfield nuclear power plant is a big place, and it's one of the town's biggest employers. It's absolutely logical that the aloof, cynical, and cruel man who owns and runs the place, C. Montgomery Burns, wouldn't be on a first-name basis with all of his underlings. But it's hard to believe that he wouldn't remember Homer Simpson from one day to the next. After all, the safety inspector from Sector 7G has worked at the Springfield nuclear power plant for many years, and they've often interacted off the clock, even in ways bordering on intimacy or friendship. For example, Homer and Burns were on the same bowling team. Homer acted as Burns' romantic wingman, and Homer once served as Burns' prank monkey. This is to say nothing of his attempts to woo Marge, steal away Grandpa Simpson's girlfriend, or his enduring rivalry with Grandpa Simpson himself. That's why the running gag of Mr. Burns completely forgetting Homer Simpson is so funny. The character is so mean and self-serving that he can't even find a few brain cells to remember a man with whom he's shared multiple experiences. Whenever Homer comes up in conversation, Mr. Burns has to ask Smithers who he is, and this disregard is even held up as Homer's motive for trying to kill Mr. Burns. Springfield's favorite bartender, Moe Sislak of Moe's Tavern, is a deeply unpleasant guy, and Homer Simpson is one of his few friends. Moe has spent a lot of time around Homer's family and has a particular fondness for the Simpson children, and yet he never seems to recognize Bart Simpson's distinctive voice during one of his numerous prank phone calls to Moe's place of business. That only makes the running joke of Bart calling up the bar even funnier. with the Simpson boy asking to speak with a patron whose name is an obvious and slightly risque pun, and Moe slowly realizing he's been made the fool and flying into a rage.
Is Oliver there?
Oh.
Oliver, clothes off.
Bart isn't much of a student, but he really puts in the effort when coming up with fake names for his prank calls. Among the more memorable, there's Alcoholic, Lee Keebum, Amanda Hugginkiss, and Bio Problem. The joke really sails when Moe reacts perfectly, asking to hold bar if the person with that name is there, only to completely lose it when he realizes that he said he has a BO problem. Springfield isn't all that big a place, and Homer Simpson does a lot of dumb things. That creates the unique situation in which he winds up featured on the Channel 6 News, with Kent Brockman reporting on his latest boneheaded or accidental shenanigans. In providing the audience with background info on the subject of the story, Kent will pull up a file photo the station already has on hand of Homer Simpson. It changes with the episode, and it can only hilariously hint at just what stupid activity Homer was engaged in when the photo was snapped. There's at least a whole season's worth of Simpsons episodes that could tell the stories behind these extraordinarily damning and embarrassing pictures, such as an angry pantsless Homer shaking his fist at a zoo ape, Homer with his tongue stuck to a pole, and Homer apparently trying to set some kind of world record with more than 100 cigarettes stuffed into his gaping mouth.